Today is Tuesday, August 31st. It is 9 o'clock in the morning. I would ask Commissioner Adamsack to do our invocation and Commissioner Pickens to do our Pledge of Allegiance. This meeting is now called to order.
Rise if you can. Dear Lord, thank you for bringing us all here together today. Please keep us all in health and keep all those that we care about and loved ones in health in our community. Please make sure that you keep a hedge over all of us in order to keep us safe from COVID, safe from all the pressures of the world. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Adamsack, Commissioner Pickens. Next on our agenda is any public comment on agenda items. Anybody in the public want to speak about the agenda items? And seeing no one rushing to the podium, we'll start with our item C, Administration Budget Fiscal Year 2022 Better Place Plan Fund and Project Details. Julianne?
Good morning, Commissioners. You'll see in the agenda item that fiscal year 22 state projected revenues are $6.8 million for the breakdown of fiscal year 21 projects that will carry forward. Those carry forward numbers, as always, will change based on where we get to in actual project expenses versus projected expenses. And then you'll see a breakdown of proposed fiscal year 22 projects. In keeping with the roughly 70% going to a combination of dirt to pave and resurfacing, that leaves a small amount for a couple of drainage projects and a bridge improvement project.
Mr. Turner?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to see us increase our budget this year on resurfacing.
We did. Sorry.
Even more.
Okay.
I know dirt to pave is very important, and we need to certainly strive to keep around our 70% like we started last year.
Okay.
But I would like to see, we've got too many roads in Putnam County that are surfaced now, that are paved, that we're losing, and we're not being able to keep up with them. It would be a crying shame to have to tear them up and repave them at some point in the future because we hesitated on keeping up with them on the resurfacing. I would like to propose that we take some of the dirt to pave and make the resurfacing $2 million in addition to the gas taxes this year instead of 1.4.
Okay.
I think is what you had in there.
Yes, sir.
That would be my proposal. I think we need to be more aggressive on resurfacing our old streets, or we're just wasting our time here in a vicious circle that we'll lose.
Commissioner Turner, I don't disagree, but I will say I don't think we need to take it from our from that line item. We actually are going to see more money coming in this year on our Better Place. Projected, we're going to see almost $1 million more on Better Place plan, if not more than that.
That hasn't been accounted for yet, Mr.
Hasn't been
Chairman.
accounted for yet, but the numbers look like they're going to be there, so we could easily look at that without taking.
I'm certainly okay with that, Mr. Chairman. I don't necessarily mean we need to take it
Right.
from dirt to pave. We just need to be more aggressive with our resurfacing. So, in my opinion, if we do have additional funds available in Better Place, like you're saying, you think we may, that'd be wonderful. But I'd like to see the majority of that going to resurfacing if possible, because we've already covered the things that we have to do, such as our payments and our carry forwards and what have you in the original budget. So I'd like to see most of the additional money, if not all of it, go to, or not most of it, because I'm sure we're gonna have another drainage project that pops up or something, but I'd like to see the lion's share of it go to resurfacing this year and try and catch up with all these roads that we've got that we're losing.
Yeah, I think we can easily see $1 million there, and we've been working on that diligently, and it looks like that we're just watching it very closely, and unless something goes completely haywire.
Could we possibly maybe increase it to 2 million resurfacing?
Yeah, that's an easy
for
one.
now, and just to see, and then and then use the projected income from the additional to cover that 600,000, and if it doesn't materialize, then we may have to take it from dirt to pave, but, you know, it doesn't make sense to keep paving roads and then losing the ones behind you. That just doesn't make sense.
I agree.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Mr. Adams,
On the reserve for future debt, I guess that's for the jailhouse, is that correct?
The bottom line, the reserve for future debt is for the 405, that's the utility fund.
Okay. Why does that come out of Better Place Plan?
Better Place Plan funds were used as pledges or collateral against the debt. And so it has to come from BPP because BPP will end prior to the debt being retired.
There's no way for us to move that pledge to general fund or some other means?
No, there
Or to
isn't. Those are in the,
renegotiate
that's
that
in the
debt?
loan documents.
It was actually listed in the state audit that was done several years ago, that was a finding that Better Place monies needed to be set aside because those revenues were pledged for the utility fund debt. And as Mrs. Young mentioned, that the debt extends past the life of the Better Place Fund.
15 years.
Better Place Fund can be voted back in, however, that's not a certainty. So that was the finding, and that's why that amount is set aside each year.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Comments, Mr. Pickens?
Just on the extra money for resurface, so we're gonna move that out of dirt to pavement over to resurfacing for now, and with anticipation of extra funds coming in towards the end of the year. I mean, with our sales, with Better Place Plan, is that correct? We're gonna move it over?
Well, are you asking me, I don't know the numbers part of it. Ms. Young's gonna have to tell me that part of it. I just wanted to increase it to 2 million. If she feels comfortable with the Better Place Plan numbers with the additional projections, then she can go ahead and budget it now out of the additional increases that she thinks is coming. And so we should be fine without reducing the dirt to pave.
Okay,
She's gonna have to tell me if she can do that with her numbers,
okay,
with her budget.
all right.
We're
Mr.
still
Adams?
working on those projections, and those are projections we're working through at this point.
Mr. Adams,
On the jail debt, the second to the last item, is there a way for us to take that out of general fund reserves rather than Better Place Plan?
I also believe BPP was pledged for that, but I have not looked at those loan documents, so it is possible.
I think with the jail debt,
Wasn't.
I
It
don't think that BPP was pledged for the jail debt, but that is just what the commission decided to do at that time whenever the jail was constructed, was that payment would be coming from BPP. So I do think that the county commission does have the ability to pay that out of general fund if the majority of the county commission wants to do so.
It just seems to me that it's not in the spirit of what the community feels BPP should be used for. And I think we have room in our general fund to do it, based on reserves of 16 million, and then everything I've seen in here, and what's been supplied to me by staff, 872,000 is within that realm, based on the fact we're only required to keep 10%. And our
That
goal
debt's
is,
reoccurring, though.
yeah. Okay.
Mr. Adams, let me, back when first got here, we didn't have the reserves that we have now. And what was happening, the general fund was giving the money to the sheriff with a agreement that the sheriff's department would pay that sum back. It was I didn't understand why we were doing that when it's a county-owned building, the jail is. So the board made the decision at that point to go ahead and use Better Place Plan and not, because why would we charge somebody and then get the money back? It just didn't make a whole lot of sense for a county-owned building.
Yeah, I don't think either makes sense, but,
Yeah.
okay.
Well, we had to have a jail, no doubt about that. Mr. Turner, Mr. Rawls, I think y'all both hit the light at the same time. So I'll go with Mr. Rawls first. How's that sound?
Well, we've got, when the money was pledged from the extra 1 cent sales tax. The expiration date of the sales tax was ahead of the expiration of the payoff of the jail. So I was,
That's the utility fund, not the jail, and Mrs. Frank just looked it up. The jail is actually pledged from the half-cent sales tax, which is a general fund revenue.
when I talked to Stacey Rappel, specifically to the jail, she said that we had to make extra payments so the jail would be
That's,
paid off.
that's on the utility fund debt.
Yeah, but when I asked her, she sat down and I asked her what the sinking fund was, and she started going through all that. And she said when the jail was built, money pledged from the jail was pledged from the Better Place tax dollars. And as such, the tax would expire prior to the mortgage being paid off.
Yeah,
So we had to put
I
extra money in.
understand. Yeah,
So you-
but just reading the actual document, it
So
says
she was
half-cent
incorrect?
sales. She was incorrect, that's
So
right.
2.5 years, that's what we've gone on.
Well, both debt is paid out of Better Place.
I
The
know, but
utility
I'm just
fund
saying,
debt with the
I'm speaking
550,000.
specifically to the jail.
Right.
Over 2.5 years, what I was told, and we discussed it at public meetings, was that the money had to come out. We had to make double payments until we got to a point where there was enough money captured. So when the tax expired, if that happens, then the debt is completely paid off.
Yeah, and we're doing, that's what we're doing, that's that
But
additional
the
550,000.
point is, the
set
staff
aside.
didn't know at that time. I'm glad we know now
Mm-hmm.
that we looked at the documents, but at that time, it wasn't an assumption. What was being stated was, this debt service is coming at a better place because, and we're paying so much more because we have to cover extra part of it until we get to the point where, we're satisfying the debt when with the expiration of the Better Place tax. So you're saying this is a utility fund now,
There's two debts coming out of Better Place plan
Correct.
every year. One for the utility.
right?
And one for the jail.
Right.
And then there's an additional set aside of 550,000 a year for the utility. Let me see if I can find it in here. There's a transfer of 550,000. If you look at the top of page 4 in your packet, budget transfer dash reg water fund. That 550,000 is assisting the utility fund with the debt payment. That's not the whole debt payment. And then the very
at?
bottom line, which is reserved for future debt, 405 fund, page 4. There is also a set aside of 550,000 within the Better Place Fund that is being held, and you can see the total FY22 budget is now increasing to $2,750,000. That is that additional set aside for the utility fund debt, the life that extends past the expiration date of the Better Place Fund. And then just above that, the second line from the bottom shows the budget transfer for the jail debt, $872,520. That is the total amount of the annual debt service on the jail. So there's actually three different amounts. 550,000 transferred to the utility fund that helps with the debt service payment annually. It's not the total amount. The $872,520 for the jail, which is the whole amount for the debt service on the jail, and then an additional $550,000 that's set aside within the Better Place Fund, kind of as a reserve amount for that additional utility fund, that debt that extends past the life of the Better Place Fund.
I'm good for now.
Okay, good. Mr. Turner, you have the floor, sir.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't feel like if we start taking the debt service out of this for the jail and put it in general fund, then we're gonna blow our budget up and go back to balancing our budget with reserves, which is the thing that we've worked so hard for the last 3 years not to do, is use reserves to balance the budget. The last thing we should consider is moving reoccurring expenses into reserves, because that's a catastrophe in the future is what that is. So, I have no problem making one-time expenditures out of our reserves, which is what reserves are there to do. But putting reoccurring expenditures in there is asking for a disaster. I feel like that as long as we try to stay up around the 70%, I mean, keep in mind, I know Commissioner Adams Act wasn't here then, but either last year or year before, the the Better Place Plan budget was at 40% for roads to pave, and we changed that. We said we want to stay up around 70% because the previous commissions had made, obligated some of the Better Place Plan funds for debt. Whether we agree with it or not, it's obligated by previous, so we've got to pay it one way or the other. We could definitely take it out of reserves, but if we did, we've just done the biggest no-no that we can, which is put recurring expenditures in covered by reserves. That's just something that we should not even consider, in my opinion. We have been looking at some of these debts. Ms. Young, Ms. Franks, myself, we've all been looking at some of these debts, especially for the utility fund, with the hopes of bringing a recommendation or possible solutions to the board for their decision on different options that were available. Because of the current situation, such as ARCA, such as different things, if you pay off one of these, there's repercussions that we're not seeing coming. I mean, I'm just telling you, there's more to it than let's go ahead and pay off our house.
Right.
There's more to it than that. Some of the grants that we get seemingly right now are because of some of this debt that we're incurring. I'm not sure, but maybe. And so that's part of the pie. And you got to look at the whole pie here and not just take one slice and move it over and say, okay, it's all fixed. It's got to be a comprehensive plan to try to make that sustainable, the utility system. So the first thing that I looked at when we went into this was how could we take and pay off the utilities for a one-time payment, pay off utilities, get the $2,750,000 off the books, back into dirt to pave. How could we possibly shuffle the money around and make that more self-sustaining with a one-time non-reoccurring payment? And that's what we're still looking at. But then we run into these other obstacles as we're going, and the obstacle is that if you, certain ones of these, if you pay off, it doesn't really help you in the long run. It just really doesn't, because you've still got, unless you pay them all off, which is more money than we have, then you've still got to pay some of this money towards them. So you haven't saved anything in the year-to-year payments from the Better Place Fund. I'm still working on that, guys, but you know, I know it's been a couple of months, but this is government, and as much as it disturbs me, it takes more than a couple of months to get this worked out. I want to do a call out to Ms. Young and a call out to Ms. Frank, because I know they've diligently been working on doing this. I understand Ms. Frank has even gone back and started reading all of the loan documents from way back when. It takes time. They have other things to do other than just work on my project. And so, again, thank you for what you're doing. I appreciate it, but we've got to take time to do this, and I don't think putting payments in there, reoccurring payments, taking it out of Better Place and putting it in the other is the thing to do just yet. Now, it may be we can get there, guys, and I'd love to see it right along with you. I would. I'd like to see 90% of it go to dirt to pave, but we're not there yet, and we've got to figure out a way to make it do it that's not a detriment to future budgets in the county by moving it to reoccurring. So another thing is I'm not sure. I know that we're going to have an ARCA discussion on the 7th. One of the subjects that I want to broach that I don't think Mr. Sullivan has been able to determine just yet is, can we use part of that ARCA money to pay off this debt from the stuff we already have? If we can, it will clean up the Better Place Fund as far as utility debt. And so that might be a way to clean all this up, make that sustainable, expand it and make it even more sustainable. And instead of just making the utility system sustainable, it might actually turn it into a money maker for the county from that point on. So those are the type of things that we're looking at on the utility fund, but we're just not there yet. So back to today's discussion, I don't think we need to change any of the monies out of the Better Place Fund, which is recurring payments that we know are coming, and put them into reserves, which should be saved for recurring, non-recurring payments. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Adams, you have the floor, sir.
And I guess to be clear, I didn't mean for it to be in reserves. I was just stating the fact that we have a lot of reserves. I think it should be budgeted for under the general fund as a yearly cost item. So that, just clarify my statement. And just the fact that we have reserves currently that are in excess of the 16.67% or whatever that the prior commission determined is what we need to carry. We have around 7 million more, which a little bit less now that we've got this information. As far as the debt, I mean, I still have an outstanding ask for what the debts are and the interest rates and what we pay on them. I haven't received that information, but I also haven't re-asked, I guess, 6 times like I did for other things. But I'm fine with that. I just wanted to bring it up as a possible thing that I think we should look into going forward, especially if we're going to carry 20-some% reserves or 30% reserves, which is what we're doing now.
Thank you. Mr. Rawls?
All right. What was pledged for the jail in the loan documents?
Sales tax.
No, what source? So it was a bond. They had to give a source for the debt service.
The jail, it says, the county has pledged a portion of future half-cent sales tax revenue to repay $17.965 million of public improvement bonds issued in 2016. Proceeds from the bonds finance construction of improvements to the county jail. The half-cent sales tax revenue is a general fund revenue.
Okay. And what does that fund bring in a year? Around 3 million?
The general fund, or you mean
Just
the
that
half-cent sales
3 million,
tax?
3.5 million?
Somewhere in that range. I don't know what this year's is. I would have to look it up, but it's somewhere in that range. I would say at least 3 million.
Okay.
You done, Mr. Rawls?
I'm just wondering why we're taking out of Better Place.
When I got to the county several years ago, that was what, from what I understand, the Board of County Commissioners at that time said that even though they pledged half-cent sales tax revenues for the repayment of the bonds, they decided at that point in time to pay the debt out of the Better Place Fund. And that's how it has stayed ever since then.
That's right.
And I can't get to where they were then, but, you know, there's a different economy. But if we take a look at it where we are now, we're in a different economy. And it's almost like, you know, you go to the public and you ask for this extra half-cent, and it's supposed to be used for general fund, but then you ask for an extra penny, and it's supposed to be used for roads and sidewalks and, you know, things to make Putnam better. So I think we probably should be taking a look at getting that point where the money comes back out of Better Place and we can spend that extra $800,000 either maintaining what we currently have done with Better Place money or improving roads that we could in the future, let alone drainage and culverts and stuff like that, because we'll be discussing that later.
Yeah, Mr. Rawls?
Yep.
Thank you. Mr. Adams?
So I guess my question is, what's the difference between the pledge for the jail debt and the pledge for the reserve utility? If one was pledged at a Better Place plan, we can't move it. Why were we able to move the pledge for the other one to Better Place plan?
It could be moved. These debt service payments could be made with any funds that the board wishes to make those payments with. When you're pledging revenues, like at the city of Palaca, this has happened before, one certain revenue source, when the lenders are looking at that revenue source, if you've already pledged too much of that revenue source, then you're most likely won't get it underwritten for that revenue source, so you pledge other revenue sources. But it's strictly up to the county commission as to where they choose to fund each of those payments from.
So by design and intent, the jail debt was intended to come out of the general fund. So I'd like to see us plan to get it there again someday. Thank you.
Mr. Turner?
The half-cent sales tax that we're referring to that we want to switch this over to half-cent sales tax, then we're gonna have to replace what the revenues for what we've already budgeted for the half-cent sales tax. So basically what we're saying, let's take it out of this bucket and put it in that bucket, but they're both our buckets. So we don't have the money. We've already got a zero-sum budget pretty much. The only monies that we have for reoccurring expenses are $400 and some odd thousand that we have out of the 20% of projected additional revenues. Other than that, we've got a zero-sum budget. So if you take and decide, okay, well, we're not gonna pay that $872,000 anymore out of Better Place Plan, let's pay it out of the general fund, then you've just moved a reoccurring expense in being covered by a reserve, because our half-cent tax is already budgeted. So you're taking it straight out of reserves is what you're doing. And and I don't think it's a good fiscal responsibility of this board to start using reoccurring by taking these Better Place monies and trying to move them over into your reserve, because then you're using it for a reoccurring expense. So it's from now on, unless you change it again next year. Let me go back and please reiterate what I said earlier. 2 years ago, they were using 40% of Better Place Plan money for roads. Now they're using 70% of Better Place Plan money for roads. I get it. I'm not against it, but let's try to use some common sense here in what we're doing, and that would be that part of this money should be paid. And when the Better Place Plan fund was sold, or when the additional sales tax was sold, it was sold as roads, drainage, other county there's a list of them. It wasn't just roads. It's just that the commission last year believed that 70% of it should be roads, but there's other things that it was sold as. It wasn't sold as, we're gonna spend all the money on roads. Wasn't ever sold as that. It was sold as a majority of the way to get the roads from dirt to pave and save other roads and drainage and what have you. But if we're gonna do that, come on, guys, we're gonna use part of it to build a new dog shelter. Okay, so all of a sudden, you're saying we can't pay for the jail, but we can build a new dog shelter?
I think it makes Putnam a better place.
Okay, wait.
Well, I'm not saying it doesn't. I'm just saying that if, let's try to keep this in perspective here. Paying towards the jail, that debt out of Better Place is not against the rules. The reserve for future debt, if we could get rid of that, I'm all for it. And then we could take that $2 million and put it back into roads. But before we do, we've got to figure out a way to get rid of that debt, either by a one-time payment, ARCA funds. I don't know what it's gonna be yet. I don't even know if ARCA funds are even an option. But the one-time payment out of some of the reserves, and while technically they are 16 million, but if you take the portion out of it that we really need to keep, which is around 7 or 8 million, and the monies that we know that is coming, such as the bridge and different things that we know is coming out of it, it's more like 3 or 4 million, and we just are probably today gonna spend 2.8 million minus whatever we let the employees do on health insurance that are coming straight out of those reserves. So you keep adding them up and throwing things at the reserves, first thing you know, there's not gonna be any. When we showed up around here, I think there was 4 million in reserves one year, and everybody in the state was throwing bells and whistles at us, and they were throwing audits at us and everything else, saying you guys are headed down a bad path. Ask Matt, he was here. I mean, it was bad. And so over a period of the last few years, we've gone through the pain and we built our reserves. Maybe they are a little higher than what they need to be, maybe. But like I said, reserves are there for things like fixing to happen. I think it's the next discussion or 2 discussions down.
That's right.
We've got $5 million that are fixing to come straight out of reserves if we go with the plan that's on the table. If the commission decides to pay all of it. I don't believe this commission won't vote to let the employees have to pay it all. I'm telling you right now, but that's coming out of reserves. That's what reserves are for. It's not to figure out how to break the bank or how to bust open the ceramic piggy bank and get all the money out of it, and then next week you can't buy a new lollipop. I'm just telling you, we've got to have some reserves, and we're using the reserves for what reserves are for. We've got a capital expenditure thing on the deal today that we're gonna try, that are non-reoccurring expenses that could come out of some reserves or whatever, for what part of it. If we took all the expenditures that's been asked for, it'd wipe out reserves for the next 3 years. So we're gonna have to make a decision there too. So let's try to start the day with the conversation that there's only so many slices of the pie here, guys. And we've got to keep those slices in the proper places. Using 70% of this money for roads and dirt to pave, I'll defend in front of any citizen that wants to walk up and talk to me, face to face, man to man, or person to person. I will absolutely defend that, because we went from 40 to 70% in a 2-year period of time. That's pretty hefty. And we're keeping our obligations paid, which were made by current or previous commissions. So I'm gonna turn it over to y'all for now, Mr.
Thank you,
Chairman.
Mr. Turner. Mr. Rawls, you have the floor.
I understand where we are, how we got there, and all this. We're in a position to make change. I think that we've eaten from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. I think that we owe it to the taxpayers to do what's right. I think at some point, the half-cent that's supposed to pay for the jail should be utilized coming out of general fund. You're right, we have increased reserves. We've built reserves on the backs of decreased services, decreased or lower salaries, putting more pressure on our citizens and our employees to expect less and do more. You know, we do need to learn to live within our means, but at the same time, I think that we need to budget appropriately and properly. So when the public hears that there's a special tax, you know, I'm pushing hard for a special fee for fire service, for EMS, for drainage, and I don't want to have to explain to the public how this money could possibly be used for planting gardens 10 years down the road, or replacing a water tower that needs to be replaced, or something like that. Everybody that I talk to says, I don't mind paying the extra money as long as you use the money for what it's intended. And we're having this conversation now saying, yeah, we could do this, but you know, we probably shouldn't, because we don't need to pave more roads. We need to fix roads. We need to fix our drainage problems. We need to make Putnam a better place and utilize as much money as possible to do that. You know, we're not increasing our services right now in this year's budget. And I think we really need to have a serious conversation about that. You know, that's just my opinion. I'm only 20% of this commission. You guys can vote the way you want to vote, but I'm just telling you how I feel.
Thank you, Mr. Rawls. Mr. Adams?
Yeah, I just want to clarify again, I misspoke when I said general fund reserves, so you keep bringing it up. I meant the general fund. The half-cent sales tax, what is that utilized for? Because we have nothing in this packet or any previous packets that talked about how we're using that money. And I wouldn't have known to ask that because I didn't realize that this was pledged out of that, so.
It's a revenue in the general fund. The general fund pays for all your departmental's operations. The general fund is your main you can't tell me you can't hear me. The general fund, all of the revenues go in, all the expenses come out. So it's not like the BPP where it's a standalone fund and revenue source for which we have standalone expenditures.
Okay. So given that, I really don't see any reason why we shouldn't shift this sooner than later, that specific section, and then reutilize the funds. Thank you. Because it is likely that that half-cent sales tax goes to our reserve, because it's not tracked in that manner. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Mr. Pickens, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Harvey. I appreciate this discussion. And it was, you know, just a few years ago that, you know, our reserves were really down. And, you know, I think that even the previous commission were having to balance budgets by using the reserves. and raising the millage rate up. So we were slower coming out of the recession than a lot of counties. And we've made some strides, there's no question. Have we had to cut services? Probably yes. And we're in a situation now where, you know, roads aren't getting mowed, roads aren't getting graded, you know, there's things that aren't getting done. And I understand that, so we are in kind of in a predicament now that I think we'll move forward with, but I don't know that taking that out of the reserves for reoccurring is the correct thing to do now. You know, and hopefully, you know, property taxes will increase in the coming years, and hopefully we'll be able to, you know, pull ourselves out of this. But I do appreciate this conversation, but I don't know that reoccurring debt out of reserves is where we need to go.
Thank you, Mr. Pickens. Mr. Turner?
Yes, I had a question. Isn't the general fund at the present time budgeted at zero budget? That's correct. So basically, you can say we're gonna pay it out of the general fund, but then you're upside down on your budget, $872,000. So our current budget is budgeted at zero for that. So if you take it out of the half-cent sales tax, then it's, or whatever it is, that's already budgeted, so it's got to come from somewhere to pay it. So at the current time, all those funds are budgeted at zero sum, I think. And so if they are, where you're gonna pay it by having a budget that's not balanced. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Rawls?
So this is a standalone item in that half-cent, even though we don't have anything pledged towards it. And if it's not, I can prove it by saying when BPP goes away, if it goes away, then what? Then it comes out of that half-cent sales tax. So it is a standalone item in that half-cent. I would not be opposed to setting a budget strategy. You know, there's that word again, strategy. You know, I've been screaming for strategic planning, and I was going to get to this later, but I'll start now. I would be okay by setting a budget strategy that says that we transfer year by year as necessary until such a time that the general fund can support the debt service of the jail, transfer it out of BPP or other sources as they become available. So we could then slide that $800,000, $900,000 back into BPP and utilize it for what it's intended for.
Thank you, Mr. Rawls. Mr. Adamsack?
Yeah, so again, I just want to reiterate, I misspoke when I said general fund reserve. I understand what you're saying, Mr. Turner, but that's where you get to alternatives, and that's where you get to budgeting process earlier in the year, and you start planning earlier in the year, and you see if there's alternatives within the general budget, not 14 days before the budget is due, where you would offset it, where you would not do something in order to pay the $872,000. And if that didn't work out, then you don't make the change. But we need to start thinking like this at some point. We need to start doing these things. We need to start paying down our debt or looking at it. Maybe it's not possible, but we can't do it. We can't even consider it if we're not having these discussions earlier enough in the cycle where we can compare the alternative usage of the money to what we could be doing by moving this into the general fund. So we don't have the data in front of us to make that decision today. It's too late in the cycle. It's we don't have line items as, I mean, some of us requested some of that data, but we don't have line items of what everything is in the budget. So we don't, you know, you're talking about general fund, you're just going with, hey, whatever staff came up with is what we're doing. We didn't make any decision to do $872,000 on something that maybe could be an alternative use of the funds to take this out of Better Place plan and use it more appropriately, in my opinion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Staff is requesting direction on this proposed plan. I think Commissioner Turner said it well. If we see a uptick in our Better Place money that we're projecting, that we move $1 million from that uptick to the resurfacing, or look at the
Minimum of 600.
600.
Million, right.
Okay, so that's something that we can look at, if that's good with the board.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we move this forward as outlined and amended with the $600,000 additional to resurfacing.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. We got a proper motion by Commissioner Turner,
I'll second it.
proper second by Commissioner Pickens. Any further discussion on the motion
discussion.
only?
Under discussion.
Under discussion on the motion
Um,
of the 600,000 moving over.
we're just want 600,000 only, not the whole.
We're on the motion now. The motion as it stands.
It was,
The motion was to move this forward.
Motion is to move 600,000 and move this forward.
Okay, so as far as moving this forward, In future budgets, I think we should have language that's, so we get staff on board early on, that they don't start preparing this thinking that the commission's strategy is to every year have the jail debt transferred every single year. I think that should be, we should have.
Mr. Rawls, your point's made, but that would take a proposal from the entire board to make that happen. Okay? So your point's made. So all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign.
Aye.
The ayes have it. This process
I'd like to
is
make a motion.
moved forward. Mr. Rawls, you have the floor, sir.
On future budget years, I think that we should direct staff to start working with the commission to strategize before they start making assumptions based on previous years. I think that would be a lot more advantageous to the budget process and to our public.
Mr. Rawls has made a motion.
I'll second it for discussion.
Second for discussion by Mr. Adamczak. I'll go first. I think that's something that we can talk about when we get to our budget workshops, when we start that. Budget starts the minute this budget's passed. Make no mistake that they start working on it a year ahead of time. And this board as a whole can make those determinations and recommendations at that point. Mr. Pickens.
Explain, you have a timeline that they would start and then present to the commission, I guess, if we want more interaction between staff and the commission. When would this process start, and where would it include?
What I'm describing is not a process, it's a
Mr.
strategy.
Rawls, hang on. Mr. Pickens.
And would it include at some point earlier the constitutional officers also? I'm just asking for what the process would be.
I think we need to lay out a strategic plan that involves budget. So I think if, when left to their own devices, the only thing the staff has an option to do is take a look at last year's budget, dust off the numbers, plug in the new numbers, and leave everything status quo. But it doesn't give us any involvement in things like this, where we could say, wait a minute, we've had this windfall over here, or now you guys don't know it, but we're actually decided to, shift. We're funding the fire service through a special assessment, or a MSBU, or the EMS through special assessment. That's going to free up a lot of money that we can use to either sink down the tax rate or utilize in other areas. But if we don't have a strategic plan, the staff doesn't have a strategic plan from us, then there's no way for them to move forward short of what we have this year, last year, and the year before.
Mr. Pickens, you still have the floor.
I'm good for right now.
Thank you. Mr. Adamczak?
Yeah, and I don't necessarily know that I like the motion the way it was worded, but I just wanted to have the conversation. This goes back to the conversation we had at the first budget meeting, where we started talking about, instead of it being a budget meeting, being forecasting. So forecasting meaning we get an update from staff where we are with reference to reserves, with reference to commitments, with things like that, maybe on a bi-monthly basis or a quarterly basis. And we make decisions based on that information as they have it come about. I think that's smart. That's a smart way any business or government should be doing things. We didn't do that in the time that I've been here. I don't know if it was done prior. But I'd like to see where we're doing some forecasting, and we set aside during a workshop or whatever, once a quarter, or whatever periodicity the commission decides, where we discuss it during a workshop, and we just get an update. Hey, this is where we are. This is where our general fund reserves are. To be honest with you, this data for general fund reserves, how we're going to use it, I've been asking it since the first budget meeting. Julianne gave me a list of things last week. So that's the first time I got an actual answer that put numbers, estimates. They weren't even real numbers, they were estimates to a few things for both the garbage fund as well as the general fund reserve. So that did help me a little bit, but again, last week was the first time I got it. I asked for it from the dais several times. I asked for it via email at least 6 times. And I get it, she's hardworking, doing a lot of other stuff. And but that's the kind of stuff I need throughout the year to make decisions, both on things that come before us for a one-off, like let's say we have a new employee we need to hire, things like that. I don't feel like I have the information to make those decisions outside of reacting. Oh, crap, we're shorthanded here because we don't have enough people in a division. And, but I don't have enough data to really say yes or no. I'm just saying yes in the situations that have happened because it's an urgent need. and it's not really based on anything financial or with any thought process to it. And I don't want to operate that way going forward. Thank you.
Mr. Turner?
Well, trying to stay on the actual subject instead of ranting on everything that I have that I don't like about the whole county, I would like to say that I think I'm not gonna support this motion because I think it's another stab at trying to micromanage the county. I don't think that the commission's role should be to micromanage every department and every aspect of the county. I believe that we should set policy and then police that policy. So, we already have a strategic plan. We already have some of these things in place. I'm fully for the forecasting meeting that Commissioner Adams talked about, but we don't know what numbers are until July. So up until then, it's gonna be just a pure guess. I mean, it'll be a forecast, but it'll be a guess at forecasting. So, you know, I'm all for that in the spring, sometime starting the process a little earlier and try to get a forecast. And if the commission has certain priorities, then let's set them, what have you. But I don't think this motion here really sets the stage for that, so I'm not gonna vote for it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Mr. Adams?
I'm willing to pull my second of the motion and make another motion. If
I'll pull mine.
Thank you. So that motion is off the floor, correct?
Motion's been withdrawn.
I would like to make a motion that we set quarterly forecasting meetings as part of regular workshops where staff presents to us where we are in reference to the proposed yearly budget for the next fiscal year and the following year. Let's just go the current year and the next year for now. Eventually maybe we can get to 5-10 years out, where we do that quarterly during a regular workshop time.
Okay, keep it there, I'll second it.
And we have that discussion quarterly. Thank you.
I'll second that motion. We have quarterly forecast meetings. That's basically what the motion was, right?
Yes, sir.
Quarterly forecast.
I need a little clarity on that. I think he said currently this year and next year.
Where we're basically looking at the numbers where we are this year. So we have a budget that we're going to approve at some
When would
point.
that quarterly meeting start, Mr. Adams?
I would think it starts maybe a month after the budget's approved.
So in
You got a
November?
problem, though. You got a couple months that money is still coming back.
Sure.
So you're not going to get, I think you should wait.
Yeah.
My opinion, I think you need to wait at least till December.
February.
Yeah, before December, January, before you actually, then you'll know that number. Then you can have quarterly meetings.
Yeah, but you have other things. I mean, it's a quarterly
Mr.
meeting. It's
Chairman,
part
I
of,
withdraw my second.
yeah, it's part of a workshop. And I guess my thought is, oh, do we have another second then? Because there's no
No,
reason.
there's a
Okay.
question. Continue. You were talking.
But he withdrew a second.
Okay.
So do
I'll
we?
second it.
Thank you.
Okay, so my question to you is when do you start that? When did because you said now.
I think you started in October, and I think the reason why is because you have things, especially with the fact that we live in Florida and we have hurricane season, other things that come through. We have non-human events that could affect our budget almost every year in October, in that time frame from June till November during hurricane season. So that just allows us to have the meeting, and if the meeting ends up being a 10-minute part of a workshop because we don't have a lot to discuss, because nothing happened that changes our outlook in our budget, then that's the meeting. So I don't see where it hurts to have one in October and then have one again in January, whatever the 3 months is from October forward.
Thank you. Mr. Rawls?
I think we're on the right track. So, I've said since I got here, it's very frustrating that we rush up to the very end and then get handed a bunch of data. And, Commissioner Pickens at one of our workshops when we were meeting our Suite 200 commended Stacy Papel on the amount of information that she had shared with all the commissioners. And, her retort was, you can thank Commissioner Rawls, he requested it. And he had said, we'd never seen this much information before. So, the auditors ask when they ask commissioners whether or not they feel like we have a firm control of the budget and the day-to-day operation, control of the budget, our answer is supposed to be yes. This is our fiscal responsibility. I don't think that it's fair to staff for us just to say, just you guys do the best you can with it, come back to us, and then we'll let the chips fall where they will.
I don't think anybody ever said that.
I still respectfully disagree. We do not have a strategic plan that has been published and that we're working on. And I defy anybody to show me where we're working our strategic plan. And you can say, well, COVID kind of interrupted it, maybe, but we need to get back on if we have one. So there's no strategic planning in this year's budget, is there?
Yes.
Where?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Rawls, yes.
Mr. Chairman, the strategic plan was brought in front of the Board of County Commissioners, I believe, in November of 2020 and was approved.
Draft. It was a
No,
draft.
sir.
Mr.
And it's
Rawls.
posted and it's on the website for anybody to go look at, including
look at it.
Commissioner Rawls if he wants to go look at it.
We're not using it.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Pickens, you're next.
So, our budget starts October 1st, right? So if we run, are we thinking about doing this running the quarters of our budget or the quarters of, say, 2022? I guess I would think it would be the quarter of the budget, right?
Currently, as the motion stated, it starts in October, and that's how the motion's stated right now.
Julianne, would that give you time to prepare something that's meaningful? I mean,
I think if, my recommendation would be that we do it the month following the quarter end. That would be a traditional time of financial reporting and review. So you would have October, November, December, month end, and then a January review. So in theory, if you're doing financial reviews on a quarterly basis, that would be a normal cycle. I will provide anything the board would like, but I believe you'll get more out of it if we look at a quarter capture at a time.
And October would be that.
Mr. Adamsack?
October would be.
Mr. Adamsack, hang on,
Oh,
Mr.
sorry.
Pickens has the floor.
so you're saying it would be the first month after the end of a quarter is what you're talking about?
Correct. So the workshop, the data presentation and preparation would be the quarter close just immediately prior to that next workshop. So
Which would be-
October, November, December, you'd have a January
Okay.
talk. January, February, March, you'd have an April talk,
Okay.
if the board desires. But again, I'll do whatever the board would like.
Okay. That's all I got for right now.
Okay, then we have Mr. Turner, then Mr. Adamsack.
The reason I pulled my second was just because of the October thing. I don't see how you can have a forecast workshop with no information or data available. There's no data available at that time of year. So you're just sitting around guessing and talking about things and having a meeting just to have another meeting. I'm on board with the forecast deal. I really am on board with you, but it's like Ms. Young said, I thought February where it'd give her some time, but if she has time to get the end of the quarter date at the first of the year and do it at the second, to either call it the second workshop in January or something, which is transportation, I understand, but it may be that we could take a half hour out of the transportation or hour and work on this forecast workshop before transportation at the end of January. That'll give Ms. Young like 3 weeks or whatever to compile the data that we're looking for and give us the forecast of what's happened. What would y'all like to change, possibly moving forward into the next budget year, which is, I think, is what y'all are, I'm not trying to read your mind, but I think that's what you guys are ultimately trying to find, do is have an earlier shot at what do we need to do different next year. Is that correct or not? I mean,
Can I
yeah, I'm
answer?
asking you
Yeah.
this time.
So I'm looking to look back and then look forward, absolutely, sure.
Yeah, okay, so if you would amend your motion to start it in January after the quarter, I'll vote on it with you.
So-
And Commissioner Rawls already seconded it, but I'll third it for you.
I guess I really don't care when the meetings start, but keep in mind, October is the month after the end of a quarter. So October is a valid quarter end, so it would allow us to reflect back to July, August, and September, which are, by the way, some of our most expensive months of the year, because that's when we're doing a lot of our maintenance on the roads and
Isn't
a
what
lot
we're
of our
trying,
work.
isn't what we're
We're
trying
trying to look back and then
Isn't what we're
forecast
trying to
forward.
do, though, is trying to take the information that we can gather and use it towards the next budget year?
Sure,
Isn't that
and
what your ultimate goal is?
July, August, and September are very key months in our budget year, because they're where we spend a lot of our money. So I think the October one has a lot of value, possibly as much or more than other months.
Raising her hand.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Adamsack, you have the floor now, sir?
I think she wanted to say, Julianne wanted to say something.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And Chairman and Commissioner Adamsack, we can
I'm trying.
engage at any time you want to. I believe it would be very difficult to come in and start this October, being that we have year end, and this is the one time that we backdate payments to get them closed out into September. So even through mid-October, we're posting payments back into September to close out our fiscal year. So if you want to do a fiscal year review, I would not recommend it in October. We will have the AFR, and Susan would not recommend it in October either. We will have the AFR, which is a comprehensive look back at the entire year that comes out in March.
I think we're going beyond the scope of what the motion is. I'm just talking about looking back 3 months, comparing it to what we could do the next year, things like that, so from a planning perspective, not to make any decisions based on it per se. And if removing October for this year allows us to move forward with this, I'm all for it. So let's start it in January. We'll do January, April, July, and then next year in October, we'll be prepared to do a quarterly the following year, because we'll have a rhythm.
You've changed your motion with agreement from the second that it
I would
would
rather
be
y'all
start
pull the
January.
motion.
Do you want to
Just
pull
pull
the
the
second?
motion and start over.
When I pull the motion,
Yep.
I'd like to make a motion that we start doing quarterly forecasting meetings based on the prior quarter, forecasting into the current year compared to our goals, into the next year, starting January of 2022, and then moving forward quarterly from that point on.
I'll second that.
Proper motion by Commissioner Amzat, proper second by Commissioner Turner. And we have people on the, Mr. Rawls, you had your light on, but I guess now the motion's changed, so sticking
Still
to the
relevant.
motion only at this
So,
point?
when you were in the military, did you guys have OPTARs?
Okay, we're
we
talking
did.
about the motion
So the
right now.
OPTAR was an operating target for our budgets. And we looked at our OPTAR every month to see where we were, and we knew what pains we might have coming up. And then if we did have any critical incidences, because our budgets are pretty much etched in stone. If we came up at the end of the year with no money, we were out of money. But it sounds to me like we're trying to have a conversation about planning, which is, call it whatever you want. I think that we should be doing this. I think we should also be engaging the department heads to find out what their future pains are looking like. They know by January, they'll definitely know.
All right, we're on the motion only right
I
now.
understand that, but
So-
I'll take my time and speak. Thank you.
Okay, no,
So
we're going to stay on the motion.
I am on the motion.
Okay.
So, you interrupted me, isn't gonna do you any good.
I'll call for a vote, Mr.
Call
Rawls.
it like I see it. Call the vote. Go ahead.
Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. The ayes have it. We're going to take a 15-minute break. We ready to get started? It's 10:15. We're going to call our meeting back to order. If everybody grab their seats. And next item on the agenda is our fiscal year 2022 capital expenditure plan discussion. And Julianne, do you have that item?
Yes, sir. What you'll see attached, you saw a similar one of these when we did our budget workshops back in June. This is the revised and final request of the department heads for capital for next fiscal year. You're also going to see fiscal year 21 projections. That number is going to grow and shrink based on what we think is going to close out by year end and what actually does close out by year end and what we carry forward. So those numbers certainly will morph. And then you'll see an itemized breakdown on page 7 of each of the capital broken down by the division making the request.
Okay. Commissioners, any comments?
Could I have a copy of, page 5 and page 7? They
Here, I got one.
Too good on this iPad.
Take them right there. They're inside that book. Mr. Pickens, you have the floor.
Yeah, Julianne, I believe the ones that were, I think, highlighted in green may be able to use ARPA funds.
That's correct. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that, Commissioner Pickens. Thank you. The ones that are in green are tentatively slated to look at for ARPA funding. Obviously, that conversation will be held more in-depth on the 7th, and then more in-depth the more information we get about final eligibility rules. But we believe at this time tentatively that the ones in green are good candidates for ARPA funding.
Okay, and then the blue, or is that
The
just-
blue is the portion of the transportation fund that the general fund
Fund
has to
cover,
cover.
okay.
Yes, I just wanted to call to your attention.
Okay, thank you.
And
All right.
again, projected.
Thank you, Mr. Pickens.
So, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Cerna?
So basically, shouldn't we wait on these capital requests until such time as the only way we can fund them is out of reserves, because all the other money's used. So before we start saying, JR, you get a fire truck, and animal control, you get a new truck, and before we start picking, because we can't fund them all, not unless we want to go wipe out all funds we have. And so if that's the case, shouldn't we wait to see what ARCA may or may not cover until we got an ARCA meeting in 2 weeks?
1 week.
In 2 weeks?
1 week.
1 week?
Yes,
1 week? Okay, so
Yes,
we
the
got
7th.
ARCA funding in 1 week. Shouldn't we wait to get through that and see what we decide to try and pay for out of ARCA before we start picking and choosing down the list of who gets what? And tell you the truth, I'd like to have a staff recommendation on how much money that we can responsibly spend towards this.
Okay. We can certainly work on all of those items for you. I would say that there are some pieces of the puzzle that aren't ARPA contingent, whether or not, for instance, just easy for everybody to understand, the sanitation fund. Its capital plan is not going to change regardless of what the conversation comes out on the 7th, unless they make major changes between now and then. And so there are obviously some pieces that are not ARPA eligible dependent, just for clarification.
Yeah, I was aware of that, but
Sure.
if we're gonna spend some of the things that are, some of the items that we are on the top of our list or they're on the ARCA list, and they either can't be used or the commission doesn't vote to do that with it, with the ARCA money, then it would change the amount that we had to spend on the items. And so, for instance, there might be something that we're saying is in the ARCA funding, shaded green ARCA funding now, but it could change that we'd want to fund that, and then if ARCA money isn't used, we want to fund that before we funded something else. And like I said, I need to know how big responsibly that pot is. In other words, it's not easy to sit in here and say, okay, we got $7 million or whatever it is in here. I didn't add them all up, but we got $7 million in requests. Well, obviously, we don't have $7 million in reserve, so what you're asking us to do is pick and choose who gets what. who gets a fire truck, who gets an animal services truck, who gets a whatever, pick and choose the board. I'm assuming that's what you're asking us to do. And so if that's the case, I kinda need to know how much we can responsibly spend. Taking the healthcare money out of it after we get done today, we'll need to know how much we have left in reserves that you don't see coming. I know, such as the bridges and such as, the minimum that we need to keep by state and if we pay for health insurance and anything else you can think of that we need to spend that money on, I need to know how much we got left. Is it 2 million, 3 million, 1 million, whatever it is and then give us a list of how you came up with that. In other words, why we've got 16 or whatever. So if that's what we got it currently is 16, then fine. We need to keep 7 or 8, and I'm just throwing numbers. We need to keep 7 or 8 by accounting reserves, and then we've got some for the bridge, some for the health insurance, some for these different things that we're gonna pay. How much is left? That's what I've got to know. Instead of just saying, okay, let's pay for reserves. Next thing you know, we don't have any reserves, and we'll say, uh-oh, we're out of reserves. So I need to know how much that is.
Thank you, Mr. Turner.
Before I can move this one forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Adamczyk?
I agree 100% with Commissioner Turner on that subject. And then, if that's how we're gonna do it, is we're gonna wait for that information. I don't really have any further questions at this time.
Okay.
But I
So
guess
what
we'll see
we
how
should-
this goes.
Can we
So-
bring it back?
Yeah, I
Can
think
we
we
bring
should
it back
bring-
on the 7th with the information that's just been requested
Yeah, let's do it
following
at-
the insurance
Let's do it
decision?
at the end of the meeting after
Okay.
the ARPA conversation and funding.
Okay.
And we can maybe pull some of these out, and then we'll know exactly what that,
Okay,
not exactly, but we'll know roughly what the general fund reserve is.
Okay.
So we can do that at the same meeting. We'll just put that after that topic of discussion.
And
Okay.
may I make one other request?
Yes, sir.
When you send that stuff out on your paperwork, would you break, like the sheet that has all the stuff on it, would you break it up into 2 or 3 sheets instead of sticking it on one page and make
Sure.
them straight up and down instead of landscape? And where you can read it on something without changing your orientation all around electronically?
I'm sorry.
That would help me.
I apologize for
Then I
that.
can't read it without blowing it up, like that in there, I can't even read what he has, even with my glasses on.
small.
So if you could make that 2 or 3 or 4 pages and blow it up where we can see what it is, I'd appreciate it.
I'll be happy to.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman, we'll implement the Turner Rule.
Yeah, cannot see, cannot hear rule.
We can use planning's plotter over there and make it really big. So we can make that happen, can't we, Mr. Ciapi?
Chairman, I have one other.
Yes, Mr. Adamczyk.
Just so that we're not in the weeds when we do this after the 7th, the interlocking improvements and Huntington improvements for sanitation fund, is that partly the fixing of the scales that we've discussed? Has that been accommodated in this?
Let me get back to you on the details. Mr. Tilton's out today, so he couldn't join us, but I want to give you the exact details of what he has in his plan for those improvements.
'Cause I know we talked about that,
Yeah.
it turns out it's probably cheaper than we ever thought.
Yeah, exactly.
And repairing them's probably an option, so that's kind of exciting for me, and I just wanted to make sure we're accommodating that in this budget. And
Isn't that a different pot of money, though?
It
They
is.
pay for their own
They-
stuff, yeah.
They do, but we've been told that it might be a lot, and we're finding out now that it might not be. But there's also, we'll let Mr. Tilton explain, because there might be, the juice might not be worth the squeeze,
Oh,
according to
gosh.
San Matean language.
Jay might
right.
be
So,
here.
okay, all
That's
right.
pretty close.
Yeah, I don't have any of
Someone
these
from Interlochen,
juice
that's real
squeeze
close.
things.
I kept going west. I was in Francis, and then I was in Interlochen. Okay, so we're going to put this off until the 7th. Next item on the agenda is the insurance fund discussion. Julianne, you got that? Looks like it's your show today, right?
All right.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. So we broached this conversation a few weeks ago, and what I'm bringing to you is basically a true up for fiscal year '21. So the budget and the actual claims, the actual claims exceed what we budgeted. In order to get us through the end of fiscal year '21, based on the claims data and trends, we're projecting to need another $919,788. Plus, we have to adjust our reserves to account for the higher claims dollars. So reserves by statute require 60 days of claims. Every time your claims average goes up, that reserves has to change, obviously. So there's a reserve line there, bringing fiscal year 21 need to 1.365 and some change. And then we are, at this time, budgeting to forecast the same claims trend for next year, so that we have adequate claims dollars to cover claims incurred for next year as well, which would be another 1.348 and some change for fiscal year 22, which brings the total need for the insurance to 2.7 and some change. At the last commission meeting, Commissioner Turner proposed a scenario, and I broke it down for the commission so that they could understand his proposal. His proposal included fiscal year 21 shortage being covered by the general fund reserves in totality, and fiscal year 22's shortage being covered 80% by the general fund, and then the 20%, at least for our employees, BOCC employees, would be passed in premium increases on a sliding scale relative to salary. The constitutional's offices would make their own determination on how to address the 20% for which they would be liable for. I broke down that 20% by BOCC as well as the constitutionals. Based on current year salaries, not accounting for if we are able to include the cost of living increase, BOCC employees' premiums would increase 1.2% of their annual salary. And logistically, in order to do this in our systems, this would be a payroll insurance premium fee deducted and divided over 12 months each pay period. So for us, it's 52 because we do a weekly payroll. And retirees, of course, would be a flat sum for those who are still choosing the blue options, not the Medicare. The Medicare retirees would be immune to the rate increase, and then the blue options retirees would be, each of them would pay in that additional $911.24 annually for 1 year.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Mr. Turner, do you mind if I ask a couple of questions first?
Have at it, sir.
Okay. The bottom line here, if I get this straight, this is 2.8 million is just a placeholder number that's going to sit over there. It's still going to be a reserve. Hopefully, we don't need it to true up everything. We won't have, and if we can offset some of that 2.8 that we talked about using the CARES Act money that's out there that's been associated with different accounts, if we can recapture that, we might be able to whittle that 2.8 million down some at that point. And for those claims due to COVID. So am I right in saying that? Is that?
You would have to take it from CARES Act dollars that are being replenished to the general fund, which is then
Right.
general fund reserve. So whether, what pot in the general fund, if you're making a specific pot, it's kind of irrelevant, but yes,
Okay.
Dollars came back in.
Well, we
coming back
heard
in.
during our process of the insurance committee meetings that some of these rates and some of the claims were associated with COVID.
Sure.
So, you know,
Absolutely.
that just tends to make me think that if we can, once we true up,
Sure.
once we go back over the fiscal year ends, then we can go back and look at trying to recapture those funds and associate them with the costs associated with COVID.
Sure.
Thank you. Mr. Turner, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to start by saying that as part of that forecast that Commissioner Adams-Ack requested that I'm on board with, I think we need to try to include in there what our forecast is currently for our self-insured health program. I don't think there's any way the loss runs at the very minimum and versus what we budgeted those loss runs to be.
Gotcha.
I think that our current setup with the insurance subcommittee and the insurance committee and what have you still has plenty of validity. Thank you, Clay, for chairing that for us. But additional things have to be done that's not being monitored by them, such as the current health of that fund. They're making extremely important decisions on what we do and how we move forward and recommendations and what have you that are very important. But that's not addressing what we need to address, which is the health of the fund. The current rate of what we're doing is not sustainable. At some point, it will take all of the reserves of the county just to insure our employees. I don't think that that unless we get that under control somehow, I don't think that that the current system is sustainable. I also believe, I don't know for a fact, Mr. Davis probably could answer this question for me, but I'm not going to put him on the spot. But I also believe that in this current year, that if we had regular insurance, purchased insurance instead of self-insurance, that our premiums would be going up a hell of a lot more than what they are right now under the current scenario, especially to our employees. So I believe we're still on the right track. I really do, but I think we need to start monitoring the loss runs in the healthcare self-insurance portion of this. And if we see that it's out of whack or upside down, we shouldn't, this is one of those situations that I think that we as commissioners have dropped the ball on just a little bit, because we should have looked at this at 6 months in, and we should have looked at it at, part of your forecast meeting should absolutely be the current health of the health insurance fund, for lack of a better term. I think that part of what the committee's working on, and I don't know if any of this has even been on the streets yet, and if it's not or it's improper, then my apologies, Mr. Chairman, I know you're on that, but I think that they're trying to look into some type of an arrangement with a caregiver where they can try to help with the cost and the different things. So I know that there are important workings of this that are being looked at by the subcommittee, and like, again, I'd applaud them for that. But I think we've got to start looking at this more often as commissioners, and I know that we have some insurance expertise up here, and so maybe we can help some. Let me see. Is there any way, now I'm probably fixing to slap a hornet's nest with a big stick right here, but is there any way that we can require retirees of the proper age to go on Medicare? Is there any way that we can do that? Because they actually get a better deal than our health insurance. I looked into it. I'm on Medicare. It's a better insurance than the county offers. So I'm not saying that we kick them out or anything, but is there a way that we can require, is that against the law, that we say you can't, you go on, you're 65 years old, we'll still give you blue option of Medicare, but you've got to go on Medicare, because it saves the county a lot of money every year in their loss runs. And it's not like it's worse insurance. I think it's better insurance.
It is.
And so we're not asking them to take a cut on anything. So could we look into that? Is there some way we could say, retirees, we appreciate your service, everything else, but our loss runs are dying, our self-insurance fund's dying, you need to go on Medicare, we'll still furnish you blue options. So they're not out anything or whatever, or at a reduced rate if they're a retiree like we do now.
I'd like the opportunity to look into it for you. I don't have an answer for you today.
Well, if you could look into that, I think that's going to be part of the solution if we can do it. Let me see if there's anything else on the list. I've already said this system we're doing now is completely unsustainable, and I realize that. Monitor the fund, retirees. I think that's all I have today, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Is there any other questions? Again, I'm going to say that I think that personally, I appreciate Mr. Turner, you digging into that, and I think it's appropriate to bring any ideas to the table. But I don't see us passing any of that on to the employees at this point. It's going to hurt some employees at that, and I think it's just a placeholder number. There is a number there, but what that number is or could be might not be the 2.8 million or 2.7 that we're looking at. So I'm in favor of just moving 2.7 over. That's how I feel. Any other questions?
I just have a comment, if I may,
Yes, sir. You
Mr.
may,
Chairman.
Mr. Turner.
I don't disagree with you at all in moving the entire amount over. I just feel like that if we were doing this for real, and I say for real, but if we were doing it for real, the actual percentage that the employees would have to pay would equal to a lot of them's paycheck. Just telling you, because we're actually trying to recoup $269,000, the BOCC $107,000 of it, out of the entire $2.7 million. I know that that's a very small portion of the entire thing, but at least we're not saying if you want to have health insurance, you've got to spend $120 a week, or whatever that number would be, instead of 1.2% of your paycheck. If we were trying to pass the entire, even a percentage. I mean, take the city of Palaca, which I very seldom ever refer to us and them in the same breath, but I'm gonna do it this time. They pay 75%, flat out. So if our insurance premium goes up $100 a month, we pay $75 a month, and you pay $25 a month. End of story. There's just no other to it. I'm not saying we do that. I think we're being very gracious and very compassionate to our employees for two reasons. Number one is I believe we're doing it because we made it fair. We made it fair by doing a percentage of your salary instead of everybody pays the same, whether you make $10 an hour or you make $90,000 a year, you all pay the same for health insurance. We didn't do that. We did the 1.2% to make it fair for the person that drives a tractor at Public Works, as well as administration at the other end of that spectrum. We tried to make it fair. So giving them a very small piece, 20% of 1 year, when we got 2 year shortfalls, I think is completely fair. But I'll go along with you. If you want to do the whole thing, I'll move it over. But I just feel like we need to let everybody know that it's not sustainable. It's just not sustainable. And it's even less sustainable if we don't pass a small portion, 1.1% of payroll in 1 year period for 2 years of losses. That's very, very small portion that we're asking the others to participate in. But I'll go along with either way you want to do it, Mr. Chairman. I will.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Adamczak?
I'd like to go along with Commissioner Turner on this. So I like the proposal. I think that the benefit of it, when you have a lower wage employee, a lot of times, I'd rather see us, if we were going to do something for them, I'd rather see it on the pay side and not on the benefit side. And the reason why is because some people, especially your lower paid employees, tend to be the younger people who tend to opt out of insurance more often than the older people because they don't need it as much. And that allows them the option on what to do with their money if we found a way to take it. If we're going to do something for that tier of employee, I think it should be on the pay side so they can choose whether to keep that pay in their bank account or whether to put it towards their health insurance. And then obviously for those people that are already excluded, who have alternative insurance sources, like Commissioner Turner and myself at this time, I just think that at some point we do have to do some cost sharing. And this is the fairest way that I see to do it.
Mr. Rawls?
I agree with Commissioner Harvey on this one. I think that and because of this year, this is a unique year. We've got a 5.5% inflation as of yesterday, and when they adjust that, it could be as high as 6%. If you hit it with another 1%, that's 7 with the insurance, and then we give a 3% adjustment, which is just keeping them 4% underwater. So as much as it pains me to say, we really, this is where we should be looking to use our reserves. I don't know that we need to do it all in one bite. I think, are you doing the whole thing this year, or?
We have to true it up this year, but there could be some CARES Act money that offsets that.
CARES Act or ARPA?
CARES
Okay,
Act money that's sitting out there that we could recapture after the fiscal year ends. They're
Right.
looking at it, all the processes right now.
But why can't we budget for half of it in this year's budget coming up?
Well, I think we were short last year, this current year's budget, and we know we're going to be short next year. But it's a placeholder number. It's still our
Okay,
reserves at the
okay.
end of the day.
Okay.
They're not going out unless we have catastrophic
You're
events.
saying the same thing, I'm saying this in a different way.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Thank you. Mr. Pickens, you're next, sir.
I agree with Commissioner Turner. I think there should be some share in this. About as fair as you could do it is a sliding scale like he's talking about. Julie, I do have a question. I guess the base insurance, or maybe Marjorie's question, the base insurance, we pay now 100% on an employee if they choose that particular fund?
That's correct.
That's correct. So if somebody chooses a higher plan, do we contribute more money to that plan, or just the base amount of what their rate would be?
It's a higher amount. Once you go off the base, and I can get you the breakdowns, but if I remember right, you roughly are paying 60% of the insurance premium of the selected plan.
Okay, but not 100% of that, just 100%
Oh,
of
no,
the
no, no,
base?
correct,
Okay.
yes, I'm sorry.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pickens. Mr. Adamzak, you have the floor.
So given the basis of this, again, being to benefit the employees in a fair manner who are in the lower tier of our pay, which is who we're having the hardest time to attract and retain, and have retention for in several of our agencies, I see if we were gonna spend all the money, that it would make more sense to me to do this and take that $269,000 and apply it to those 70 or so employees that are making less than $15 an hour and spread it over there evenly. That works out to almost $3,200 per employee. And that would be more bang for the buck for those employees. And a lot of those employees that we're concerned about, which we should be concerned about, because we're having shortfalls in almost every department where we have that level of employee from an employment standpoint and from a continuing to work standpoint, that would be more benefit to them and give them more options in their household than what we're doing if we just pay the whole thing and just be done with it.
Thank you, Mr. Adamzak. And I want to close out with, we do have, the sheriff is still short, the clerk is still short, the supervisor of elections is still short, and this would just be an added burden onto them. And I think that we should look at if we can move the 2.7 million out of reserves to clean this up. And I believe we should give Sarah and Marjorie and the insurance committees the opportunity to succeed this year. I think Sarah's got some really good plans. They're kind of old plans that have been dusted off a little bit and looked at. And I think we can move this into the right. And if we do, as Commissioner Turner says, we really start looking at these numbers on a monthly basis as fast as humanly possible, that we can get to it. And also capturing what kind of revenues we are receiving. We haven't been doing that. So I think with all those in mind, I would like to give them the opportunity to succeed on this. Mr. Ross?
I'd like to hear from the sheriff's department since they're here right now and see what their input is, and maybe Mr. Parker as well.
I believe I was next.
I'm sorry.
I'll be brief, but thank you, Mr. Rawls. On behalf of the Sheriff's Office and our members, I would just really ask the County Commission to consider absorbing this total amount for one more year. I agree with what was just said about some changes in administration with the county and the human resources side. Our health plan leader, our wellness leader at the Sheriff's Office has already spoken to her. There's some great opportunities coming. And one of the things I would implore the insurance committee to look at is we need to find a way to financially incentivize our folks that manage their health correctly. It's not fair, in my opinion, that I pay the same amount of insurance or a person in my circumstances pay the same amount of insurance when I go to the doctor twice a year. I get blood work twice a year. I consult with the doctor twice a year. I've engaged in a health plan with my doctor to lose about 60 pounds and really taking control of my health, but I pay the same thing from somebody that hasn't seen a doctor in 3 years, has no idea what their blood level, no idea what their blood sugars are, no idea what their cholesterol levels are. So those folks that don't manage their health and don't do certain things and hit certain benchmarks should pay more for their insurance than those of us that are managing our health. And that's the way the majority of our folks at the sheriff's office feel while we've launched our own wellness program. So in short, I'll stop. With the county, the sheriff's office will have about a $91,000 burden. It will be the intention of the sheriff to absorb as much of that for our employees as we can, if not all of it, because while it is a small amount that the increase could be on some of our folks, it's just another sign. It may not hit their pockets hard, and I agree with Mr. Turner on that. If we have to do it, I think I like his format, but it's just another sign that Putnam County is not moving us forward with salaries and benefits, and I just can't afford to create that impression, and I can't afford to put any more burden on them. And it would be well worth $91,000 for us to run the risk of losing anybody over this insurance. And while they may not leave because of that dollar amount, they'll leave because of the emotional impact that places on not seeing us continue to move forward. We estimate that every deputy sheriff that leaves us costs us $64,000 to replace. So that's less than replacing 2 deputies. So we will do everything in our power to go ahead and absorb that $91,000, plus or minus whatever it may be, on behalf of our employees. But again, I'll close with, if the commission could give us one more year and let us work closely with the county and the county's insurance plans and our wellness programs, and let's see if we can right this, hopefully emerge from COVID, hopefully encourage our employees to be better and engage in better health, and charge those a little bit more that don't take their health into control, because they're the ones that are costing us, and incentivize those that do have wellness plans and that their families have. So with that, I appreciate the opportunity. That's our thoughts. Did you have a follow-up question on that, or is that okay?
No, but I thought I was the only person in the world that had to go see the doctor every 6 months. So the VA has me on the same thing, and I didn't know why, but.
I'll just give you one example. And I don't want to ever compare us to St. Johns County. We're not comparison, but my wife works there. And here's what I like about theirs. Her insurance as a single person is free if she goes to the doctor every year, has a blood screen done, and has a consultation with her doctor about ways to improve her health. Otherwise, she pays.
Oh.
She has to hit all 3 of those things in order
Say
to
those
get free
again?
insurance. What's
You have
that?
to see the doctor once a year, and what else?
She has to see a doctor. Well, she has to go to get labs first, then see a doctor, and then has to have a consultation with that doctor about improvements that need to be made to her health. And if she does that, she gets free insurance.
Okay.
If that's not important enough for her to do, she doesn't get free insurance. So we have to put some of the burden on our employees to make themselves healthy, to stay out of ERs, and to start righting this upside-down situation we're in.
Thank you, Colonel Wells. We appreciate that. Mr. Parker, did you want to say something real quick? And then.
I didn't realize Charles was in here too.
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity to talk on this subject. So our office is the only office in the county that actually has no tobacco users in the office. And it's a strict policy that we will not hire somebody that is a tobacco user. We are tobacco free. We've had a lot of discussion within our office over the past couple of weeks, about this whole situation. I think Commissioner Turner's right on target. What do we know about Medicare recipients, and should they be changing into a different plan? On the other extreme, if you have a certain income level, are there programs out there that it would actually be cheaper for you to be on than actually on county insurance, even though if you're single, you don't pay anything? So we have not done a very good job of taking ownership of our plan. Okay, there are things that we could be doing information-wise to get that information out to our plan members that we could actually do better on. One of the things that we discussed in one of our meetings was telemed. How many of y'all have actually used telemed, or did you actually know that telemed could be used? Not very many people in my office actually remembered or actually used it. So that's the sort of thing that we actually need to do a little bit better on. I would agree with Joe and Commissioner Harvey that we should actually, absorb this cost this time, but do a better job of informing our staff that this is on you, okay? This is a one-time thing. If you don't take a little bit more ownership on it, then you will be paying 1%, 2%, maybe, even a little bit higher. So I asked Clay to kind of come up here as chairman of the insurance committee and kind of maybe expand a little bit more on what I just said.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. Good morning. I agree with Mr. Turner, Commissioner Turner, that it's education. Education. That's where we have failed the employees. We need to help the employees understand that this is an employee-owned insurance program. This is not fully insured. So when they make choices, we need to help them understand what those choices should be. There were 200, if you look back for 2019, 2020, 216, one of the highest generators of claims was hypertension. Well, hypertension can be controlled, but you have to control it. We had a series of employees go to the emergency room for diabetes. Well, diabetes, unless it's an extreme case, typically that should be controlled before you actually go to the emergency room. We need to help the employees understand. We've talked about it, Chairman Harvey, where we need to educate them. It's just like advertising for a business. You don't advertise one time and expect the employees, when we have open enrollment, you know, Marjorie comes around and she explains the benefits and answers any questions, and then that's it. We can't just forget about it. We have to continue to help the employees understand. We have to do better with managing the program. We need to do better with disease management. Wellness programs are great. That's a long-term payout, but when it comes to actually making an impact, we have to do better with disease management. We have to cut off some of these large claims that we're experiencing due to the employee goes to the emergency room sends the employee to a doctor, the doctor sends the employee to have scans performed wherever the doctor sends the employee. Then the employee comes back, the doctor says you are going to have 2 scripts, go to wherever you want to go to get the scripts. We have to intercede in that process and direct the employees to programs that would benefit the program and the employee, not at the expense of the employee's health, but it also benefits the employee and the plan.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Mr. Overturf, do you want to say anything real quick?
What happened to me?
I'm getting to you, I promise. We're on this one topic.
Good morning. Real quick, because my office is the smallest of the group, either way is fine with me. I would, if it's passed on to us, I will take care of it for my employees. But I do understand the sheriff's office and some of the other bigger ones, the BOCC, you all have got a lot of, so I lean more to saying if you can do it 1 year and take care of everything, then it sets the tone and shows people we appreciate them, and especially if you're ended up with a 3, but then you pass on a 1.1 or 2, then really, you know, it's a lot smaller. So I can go either way. It's whatever you all in your wisdom decide, but
Thank you.
Just wanted to say that.
Okay, Mr. Turner, you have the floor.
Okay. First of all, if the Constitutionals decided to follow the same plan, there would be no impact on their budget, none, 0, because the board is already paying for 80%. All of this year, 80% of next year, you'd only have a 1.2% of salary on your officers. I get it. You don't want none, Joe. If I was sitting in your seat, I wouldn't want none either. But I'm not. I'm sitting up here where I have to be physically responsible for this county, and I think it's very compassionate to ask the employees to pay 20% of 1 year on a 2-year loss on the fund. I fully agree. I'm trying to stay on subject, but I fully agree that since this is kind of moving over from what we're going to pay into the insurance stuff, I fully agree. It's all about education. It's all about, in the insurance committee meeting, we asked that a flyer be sent out to every employee and every person on there that said telemed's available, you know, a flyer just for that situation. I haven't seen it yet. I'm sure it's coming, but I haven't seen it yet. Quicker the better. We get for every person that does telemed because they got a runny nose instead of going to the doctor, saves big money, from what my understanding is. Health education is the key, just like Chairman Davis said. Health education is the key here. Also, having a program to where they can go to a clinic for free. You can go to the clinic for free. If you go to your doctor, it costs $100. I mean, I don't know what the numbers are, but more, a lot more. That way they're gonna go to the clinic and they're gonna get the free thing and they're whatever, but all that's got to be told to them. If they don't know what to do, they don't know. I'd be willing to bet you lunch today that if you talk to every employee Putnam County had that was that was from the median salary down, or from the average median salary down, I dare you to find 10 of them that knew that we had telemed, that they could go to MedX for cheaper, or whoever, whichever one they end up coming up with. I just really doubt that they know about all this. They get sick, they go see their doctor, that's what they've always done, that's what they're gonna do. Doctor sends them, if they got COVID now, or they think they might, doctor's not gonna see them either. They're gonna send them straight to the emergency room. So that turns a $200 deal into a $2,000 deal as soon as they walk in that door. So if we had some way else, but the key to the whole program is education. You know, and I think that the county should be smart about this. And this is way off subject, Mr. Chairman.
You have the latitude.
I think that the county ought to also institute a safety program for its workers' comp.
Oh, I agree.
The workers' comp program in this county is flipping out of control, because there's not enough emphasis being put on safety in the workplace. It's not like we don't love our EMTs, officers, everybody else, but there's not enough safety in the workplace. There's just not. We need some kind of a program put in place for comp while we're building this health insurance program and educating and doing whatever. We also need to include that in it too, because that's off the bottom line. We're self-insured on comp, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
Yeah, so it's same thing, guys.
Yeah.
Say it's all one big pot. It's all one big pot. While we're doing this, let's look at it as one big deal. Let's look at it as, how do we get the best health insurance we can for our employees? How do we keep our employees safe? And we take both these funds and we get them back in control. That's what we need to do, because they're both out of control. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm gonna step down off my high horse, but I really believe that it's just 1.2% is just of 1 year is just not much to ask of people. But like I said, it's just, I can go either route. I could go either way if that's what y'all wanna do.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Mr. Adams, that?
You said it very well. I agree. I could go either way, but I think at some point we need to start doing this. And I guess if it's not this year because of some semantics out there in the world, there's always going to be something going on in the world that has an argument against it. So my whole point is this, is the people that we have the most turnover in is those lower paid employees. That's where we have the most turnover. That's where we, in all agencies, whether it's the sheriffs, EMTs, fire rescue, or the guys working the road crews, or whoever it is, they're not the people that are going to be attracted to the idea of education as a criteria for a lower rate. Actually harms those people the most, because those are the people that are least likely to engage in that, only because they're working 10, 11-hour hard days. And I get it, the sheriff's guys are as well. If we did go that route, I think we would have to give some cutout in their year, whether it's, if the training is 6 hours or whatever it is, for them all to have the opportunity to do it. So I'm all for the training and stuff, but I think it needs to be a cutout in their schedule, not something that they would have to do outside of the workplace on their own time, whether it's the sheriff's guys or anyone's. Again, that's off topic, but this is holistic. We need to look at it holistically. I'm for moving this forward the way proposed by Commissioner Turner. And I think that's a start, but under the guise that we start having these education plans, we start having cutouts for all employees to have that time to educate themselves, however that works through our HR department, across the board, and start getting people on the right page. And I did a whole advertisement for Teledoc. The last meeting we talked about it. I use it regularly. I love it. I don't like doctors, so I'm one of those unique people. But when I need to, Teledoc is works. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rawls, if you'll be patient for just a moment, I skipped over the Honorable Matt Reynolds, the clerk of the court, as a constitutional officer in the room, and I do apologize.
I'm just hiding up here at the
Well,
other end of the
I'm
dais.
looking
so-
straight out, and I did not look over here.
That's okay.
Next time, throw something. You don't have a button, but throw
I don't,
something.
I don't have a button.
Okay.
That's okay. I just wanted to say real quick, I'm 110% agreed with other constitutionals and commissioners on education, wellness benefits, incentivizing employees to take ownership of their own health so that they have some skin in the game, so that it affects them monetarily if they choose to do certain things or if they choose not to do certain things. I'm also agreed with the other constitutionals on potentially the county funding the entire amount this year, because the situation that we're currently in, and I know the board is about to talk about it on the next agenda item, but at the funding level currently, I'm not going to be able to give raises to my employees, and they'll take whatever the hit is that I decide to do on the employee share, because I won't be able to absorb that. The budget that I turned in, I don't have, unless I cut an initiative like starting an internal audit division, then I won't have the ability to give raises or absorb that cost. The one thing I don't agree with is the sliding scale, and I liken it to like an MSBU fee. When the board's looking at doing an MSBU, say that they're paving a road, and they look at breaking down that cost, because each parcel is getting the same benefit, just like employees are getting the same benefit based on the insurance that they pick. The board doesn't do an increased special assessment fee for somebody that owns a parcel that makes more money versus somebody that owns a parcel that makes less money. I just look at it as a flat benefit. So if the clerk's office does have to absorb, the employees have to absorb any of the health insurance cost, I'm going to do it as a flat rate, because I don't want to face the potential of losing some of my higher paid employees because they're being penalized just because they make more money. And then I'm in the position of having trouble filling the lower end spots and having trouble filling the higher end spots. So that's just my opinion on it. So thank you.
Mr. Reynolds, and I'll try to make sure I don't overlook you again. I do apologize. Mr. Rawls, you have the floor, sir.
I agree with 100% of what's been said, and
Mr. Rawls, you got to turn your microphone on.
I guess I kind of take my insurance lightly for some reason. I've never really thought about it, and when Joe got up and started speaking about it, it kind of made sense to me, because I couldn't figure out why the VA calls me in every 6 months to draw blood, talk to the doctor, and they tell me to lose weight. And fortunately, I don't have any major health conditions, but we've been saying for a couple of years and that we need to get our employee safety under control. And I agree with Commissioner Turner. This is our responsibility. And I've said it in the past, and maybe this time it'll make a difference, but we could have a safety stand-down day, and where we discuss not just safety, but also the benefits of taking ownership in our insurance, and getting the employees to buy in, let them know. And I would be in favor of us paying the whole thing this one time, but let the employees know that this is where it stops. From this day forward, we're looking to save money in the future. I think we're facing very challenging times, not necessarily the people that are sitting in this room right now, but definitely a lot of the folks that work with us. And they're not our employees. They're our partners. They're our friends. They're our families. They're citizens of the community. They're what make the system work every day. And I'm really concerned. I don't do a lot of grocery shopping. I've said it before, but I went grocery shopping the other day, and I can't leave Publix without spending $100. I'm going there just to buy one meal. And for some reason, everything is just really out of line price-wise. So I don't know that sharing any more burden with the folks, and I agree with Matt in his comments about making this equal and undiminished. To me, the middle portion are the ones that get hit the hardest, to be honest with you. Your lower pay definitely get hit, but the assumption is if you go on a sliding scale, well, the people in the middle can afford more, but they really can't, because they have extra burdens that are placed on them as well. So I personally would be in favor of voting for the commission to absorb this out of reserves this one time and hastily start a wellness and safety program with our employees. And I personally would be willing to go out to the departments if need be to show support and let all the folks know that, the commission's behind this 100%. We just got to get their buy-in.
Thank you, Commissioner Rawls. I think my numbers got messed up, so I think Commissioner Turner was next. Mr. Adams, the numbers.
Go next, I don't really
Yeah.
care. Doesn't
So-
matter to me.
Mr. Adams, then you have the
So
floor.
listening to all this, I mean, there's a lot of really good information that came from everybody that spoke. And, the thing that hit the most with me, and that at my work outside of the commission, we do get incentives for a percentage reduction in our overall monthly fee or whatever, based on doing a health screening and doing certain objectives, right? And that comes from, I think the insurance company proposes that. So Benji, that may be something that you guys could adapt for us. I don't know who would do that, but somebody would, the HR, whoever would. But maybe a hybrid of the two may be in order. Maybe we say that at 1.2%, but if the employee does the health screening and does whatever the training we come up with, we waive the 1.2%. And that's across the board, it's across everybody. That puts the onus on those employees to get that done. And also, if they choose not to, it kind of gives them that incentive to, if they chose not to, that's their choice, right? And we're not talking about, I don't want it to be like something that's a 50-hour course, right? It should be 5 or 6 hours and a couple of tasks, right? I mean, I think there's an in-between here, and I think that we should try to get there today if we can.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Mr. Turner?
Okay, yes, Mr. Chairman. We talk about that we pay today one time. We are paying one time. We're paying the 1.4 million that we're already short. We are asking that they pay a portion of next year's projected shortage. We're not asking them to pay for what we're already short. It's like we're saying that we're not paying. We are paying. We're paying the first one already in this proposal. We're just not paying all of the next one. We're paying 80% of the next one. I just don't understand how everybody could come up here and say, I think y'all should pay one time only. We are paying one time only. We're paying the time that we're short. We're not passing that on, any part of it, or the projection is not, or the proposal is not. We go ahead and we pay for this year, and we pay for 80% of the projected year. If it turns out that we can use CARES Act or whatever for part of that money later on, or that part of the CARES Fund money that's coming, great. We don't have to raise dues next year, because I got a sneaky feeling that we can do all we want to do, but healthcare is doubling. You go out and buy a shingle a year ago, and you buy a shingle now, it's twice as much money. Well, it's the same thing in every industry, from healthcare to everything else. A syringe costs more, whatever costs more. So I'm just telling you, even with us working hard on this program, it's going to be a tremendous effort to get it under control to where we're not having another increase next year. So I just don't think this is out of line. I truly don't. And I think that until these programs are established and ready, hopefully everybody will sign up. It's all about education. And I think your idea of cutting out some time for them, if you're going to work here, and don't mean that I'm not tickled to death they're working here, don't take this wrong, but if you're going to work here, you're going to spend 2 hours of your morning on our dime sitting in a health meeting somewhere with us telling you about telehealth, and with us telling you about ways that you can go to a clinic instead of the emergency room unless you're on a stretcher. I mean, just things that you can do. We need to enforce that and make it happen as part of their job, not ask them to come in after work, like you said, Commissioner, but make it a cutout that they need to come and do that. Then I'm on board with that 100%. But I really think, in my opinion, we need to move this forward in a justifiable manner. I understand Matt saying that everybody ought to pay the same amount. I get it. That's where I started in this when I was trying to come up with a solution to this. And you're right, it probably is more fair, Matt, probably is. But it's not fair to me because I don't care what you say. Somebody that makes $100,000 a year, it don't hurt them as bad as somebody that makes $20,000 a year. You can't convince me of that. If they're all paying $800 or $450 or whatever it is a year, you can't convince me of that. So that's the reason, and I know it reeks of socialism and democratism and everything else, but it's fair. I try to live my life on fair, and I think this is fair. If the constitutionals decide to eat it on their own, then I think that's I'm so tickled to death y'all came up here and all y'all said that, because we got a budget discussion coming in just a minute. And if you can afford to do that, then this is gonna sure help me on the next subject. So anyhow, I believe we need to move this forward, Mr. Chairman, as presented. And with that, will you accept a motion, or are you ready?
Still got 2 more comments, and I think Ms. Sarah wants to, then we'll make a motion.
Okay.
Mr. Pickens?
Okay, thank you, Chairman Harvey. Yeah, unfortunately, as it's been mentioned in here, we're gonna have this same conversation, so in 2023, correct? Because we're actually gonna fund this whole thing for 21, right? And we're looking at passing on a portion of it for 2022.
And
Is
it
that
could
correct?
not be enough. There's no way of knowing it's a projection.
Right, so I don't see how healthcare is gonna go down at all. Hopefully that our program will continue to improve and claims will be less. And I know we discussed it at the beginning. It took us almost 3 years to decide that and get enough education and information to move to the self-funding. And we knew that all these things that were talked about, from a wellness program, having a clinic they could go to, the education, everything, get them to buy into the program, we knew that was necessary. And if the commission has dropped the ball on that, then I'll accept that. But I want to hear from the new HR director of briefly, how do we move this thing forward? Because those elements have to be part of this program to be successful. If not, we'll be back on regular insurance.
Ms. Sarah?
Sure. Good morning. So I just want to reiterate, I have sent out information to department heads about telehealth. So that has already been done. I haven't gotten the card stock in from Staples yet for the other ones.
The laminate
to,
thing?
yeah, to distribute to each of the constitutionals and our employees as well. As the Colonel said, I did meet with Major Surrency on Friday morning, and he has some really good wellness initiatives that he's working on. We compared notes, and we're going to kind of spearhead together countywide for all of our employees a wellness program and what that looks like. I do also I'm working on management training and frontline employee training, and that does include safety and workers' comp and just basically how to be safe in the workplace, what you do if you do have an accident. My opinion as far as HR, if an employee is being trained, that is work time. So I completely agree that we should carve out, whether it's an hour a quarter or, an hour a month, whatever our employees need, we need to extend that training and it counts as work time. I have worked with Mr. Grimes on working out a proposed schedule to go to the different firehouses because, he's got a bunch of different shifts. So personally, I do not know what the turnaround time is, and maybe Chairman Harvey can advise on this, but from when you educate an employee or a person, how long is it going to be before we see those benefits? I think we might see those benefits quickly as far as fewer sick days for people or things like that. I don't know how long the turnaround time is on premiums or insurance costs. I just don't know how that shakes out. But I just want to assure you that a wellness and health insurance and educating our staff are at the top of my priority list. And I really appreciate, I think the Colonel asked Major Surrency to call me and reach out, and so I really appreciate that. One final thing is we would like to be forming a wellness committee with representatives from the BOCC and the constitutionals to have staff input as what they would participate in and what they would like to see come from this. If it's less money on premiums, great. If it's a cash reward or an extra day off, that's great too. let's figure out how to incentivize our employees in taking their own health in their hands.
And let me say, I think we did try pretty good last year. It just got bogged down with COVID and things in that nature. But you asked me earlier, what's the solution basically? And I told you, you almost have to start at the end result and work your way back, because I don't think penalizing is going to do it. I think incentivizing is going to do it. And then if they can't be incentivized, then they got to take ownership, and the ownership is the number at the end of the day. And let's make no mistake about that. So I think you're on the right track. I want to help you be successful on this, so let's see where we go from here.
All right, sounds good.
Thank you. Mr. Adams, you're next, sir.
She covered a lot of what I was going to say, so I think I'm good.
Okay, Mr. Rawls.
I'm just here randomly writing notes, and I wrote teamwork and accountability. So I think that's the most important thing. When you look at corporations that are successful, some of the things that they instill in their employees is teamwork and accountability. You know, if you see somebody making a mistake or doing something dangerous, you don't call them out necessarily, but remind them that what they're fixing to do could hurt them or could hurt the company, in our case, the government. I think all incentives should be on the table. I think we should be incentivizing our employees to work smarter and not harder. And if it was our responsibility to keep our eye on the ball, and we basically failed the system, I think the BOCC should go ahead and take the hit this one time. Go ahead and pay the 100% instead of 80-20, and then, like I said before, I personally would be willing to do everything that I can, be available as much as possible to help this process along. Whether you've got the lowest paying job in the county or the highest paying job in the county, we're all equal when it comes to this. So I think we should take it from that perspective. Get out there, engage the folks that work with us as often as possible, and let them know that we're on this together and that we're going to do everything we can to get this resolved. But I can't preface enough right now, when you really study the numbers, when you look at inflation, and you cannot ignore it, we're not able to even keep our employees up with what's currently going on in the world. And I'm not even going to throw in the housing element of it. When you start looking at what it costs to rent an apartment, a house, or purchase one right now, Mr. Parker's sitting right there. He could probably tell you some nightmares that we've seen lately on housing, that the prices have just gone up stupidly. And I don't know how our employees are even going to be able to afford to live in the county that they serve. So I personally would be willing to make a motion that we absorb 100% of this.
If you'll wait just a moment, Commissioner Turner has the floor next. Mr. Turner, and then.
Yeah, I asked to make a motion a moment ago, so number one, I don't think what we're doing here is sustainable.
That's right.
I think that it's admirable, but I don't think it's sustainable. And I don't think it's being responsible. I don't think it's being fiduciarily responsible. Even with us giving the addition, even with us doing the proposal, I think we're going overboard on being responsible. I know that government doesn't run like private business, and I'm well aware of that, but there should be some basics of it. And the basics are, you keep on swallowing every cost you can find, and you won't be around next year to be in business any longer. You just can't go but so far. It has to make sense. Even with the wellness program, and nobody hopes it'll be more successful than I do, even with the wellness program and the telemedicine and the higher education and trying to get the comp under control and the healthcare system under control, even with that, because of the rising costs of everything we touch in today's world, everything, it's still, there's a heck of a chance that next year we're still going to have an increase, even with the wellness and even with the getting things under control, just because, if you take your child to the doctor to get a normal shot, it used to cost $50, now it's $150. I don't care. I mean, it just does. It just costs more. Everything you do nowadays costs more. So, I think we just need to be physically responsible about this. And so I'm going to actually make the motion that I requested I could have made earlier, and you asked me to hold off if you're ready for it.
I am, sir.
I'd like to ask that we take move forward the proposal as outlined in the packet, forward, and I'm gonna try to keep it that simple.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a second by Commissioner Pickens. Any further discussion on the motion as stated? Mr. Adams?
I guess my question is what is the time constraint we're under to make this decision?
Today.
Because this is into next year's, right? So we just said we're gonna eat last year's. So I think we could have a better product if we combine the two ideas, I think, and if we had a couple weeks for the HR director to come up with some criteria around, the incentivizing of it, to allow people to get out of it if they achieve some achievements. And whether that's the whole 1.2%, or let's say they do a wellness check and that takes $100 off or whatever it is, and whatever the amount is, and whatever that would look like. I think that I'd like to see that, and I just don't know what our time frame is as far as, are we really up against the fence here, or could we agree to pay this year's and then think about next year and the next month? Go ahead.
Ms. Julianne?
Yes, Sir Chairman. So there's two different sides to it. There's budget, which can organically move every day. But the bigger side to the time constraint on the decision before you is that we should already be in open enrollment. Open enrollment needs to open September 1st. As part of open enrollment, the enrollees need to understand what their premiums are going to be and or fees associated with the insurance plan. If we open enrollment with current premiums, then you've essentially made a decision, although not making a decision, to cover it with the general fund, because we won't have the ability, it won't be a good ability, to go back and charge back employees or change a premium. Those premiums are set for 1 year. So the only option then that the board would have is next year to increase premiums double to recoup the prior year that we just went through to make up the funds. Did you follow that? So the options that the time constraint that the biggest time constraint that we're under is that we need to be in open enrollment, and we cannot enter open enrollment until we have a premium structure for employees to determine whether or not they want to elect our health and coverage.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Turner, you have the floor.
Yeah, I'd just like to finish up discussion, if I could, Mr. Chairman, by saying that these are really two separate issues. I know it's all one thing, but it's really two separate issues. And I think the wellness program has got to go to the insurance subcommittee and the insurance committee. I mean, I just think it does. And along with telemed and safety and all this stuff, hopefully they'll put it on the front burner. But we've got to replenish we've got to set the rates, and we've got to replenish the reserves in the health insurance fund. Those are the two things we've got to do right now. So today we either make the decision, do we go forward and let the employees participate at some level, or do we just pay it all? I think that the county has been very generous and very compassionate by paying all of 1 year and 80% of the second year going forward. I think that's been very compassionate. So, Mr. Chairman, I call for a question on the vote, one way or the other.
All right. Question's been called, so all in favor of the motion that's on the table, say aye.
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 Opposed, like sign? Aye. The ayes have it. Thank you. Moving on to the next item is Commissioner Budget Inquiries. Ms. Julianne?
Yes, sir. At the board meeting, when this meeting was announced, the request from the dais and agreement was to have a list of the commissioners' questions be sent to staff, and then so that the commissioners could talk back and forth about those budget topics. I put the agenda item together with all questions received by commissioners at that time when the agenda was sent out. But, I mean, do you want me to take you through each of the questions, or tell me what you would like to?
I think we've already done the first one on the insurance funding.
Yes,
so
sir.
We're beyond that now?
The next question was the BOCC requested 20% of net new ad valorem to be used at the BOCC discretion. What's the budgeted amount and where is it? The budgeted amount is the $463,987, which was rounded up to $464, and it's tentatively set aside in a budget line specific for board direction. Staff will wait on BOCC direction to determine how those funds are allocated. Those are reoccurring dollars, so at the board's will.
Right. And before we move off of that one, the initial number that the board had on 20% was $359,217.20. So we saw an increase of $104,770.
Sure, that's from the,
Property value.
when the property values
Yes.
were certified, correct?
Correct. Okay, good. All right. Any questions on that? No? Okay, go ahead, Ms. Julianne.
Okay, a commissioner asked during the initial conversations with the sheriff's office, the projection was that they would have 500 to return, and was the number budgeted? And of course, when we have knowledge of a number, we pull it in. Those projections in further conversations with the sheriff's office, which they said at the beginning, these are projections, and that's dangerous about budget. It's a projection 6 months before budget ends, so as budget gets closer, obviously their projections have changed, and so that number is removed. Under the current methodology, please provide a breakdown of the constitute officer's budget appropriation versus the budget request. The easiest way I could do this was just with a grid is what's there, the Excel spreadsheet that you have, and the request, the appropriation, and the difference shown. The property appraiser, of course, is the only one that doesn't have a difference in request and appropriation because his budget is approved by DOR. And then the follow-up question to that was a two-part question. Could we use ARPA funding to make up the differences between the budgeted appropriation and the request? And staff's answer at this time is, I can't give you a for sure yes or no. That's going to depend on the constitutional officer's ability to provide the BOCC with a ARPA eligible funding, something that could reimburse it of that amount. Of all the constitutional offices, I believe the sheriff's office would probably be the easiest person to make that justification, and I believe it would be very difficult for the other constitutionals. But that's all contingent upon them being able to match one of their current initiatives for next year to an ARPA eligible source.
Okay, let's start with the low-hanging fruit on this one. And when you look at the sheriff's department, they have some vehicles that are not going to be in use until probably next fiscal year. So I think that was around $450,000, almost $500,000 in vehicles. I asked if we could possibly use some Better Place funds. That doesn't seem to be gaining traction because of ownership right now. I don't know how that, we'd have to look at that as we go forward. But they're still short. They're short $368,479 of what they needed, not counting if they eat the $91,000 that just passed on the health insurance. And then you got the clerk. What I was looking for there is if there's any ARPA funds that could be used on that position based on the comptroller position that the clerk serves under and managing those ARPA, that $14.4 million fund. Now, the supervisor of elections, that number has gotten a little bit better. That's down to 15,000 plus whatever if the health insurance, but it's right now at 15. I say all that to say this. If the board if we started with the number of 359,217 and we have a $104,000 increase, then I think that we could make some of these constitutionals whole. And the reason I say that, we had a really neat thing happen to us this year, and surely it's going to be captured in reserve because we sold $168,000 in surplus equipment and only budgeted $25,000. So we see money that is going to go back to reserve based on things that we weren't.
Didn't you already spend that on something?
Well, we probably did, but yeah.
I think you did. No, I think you
No,
said take the money from surplus sales and buy something else with it.
Well, we were going to look at buying
What was it, Julie?
JR sign.
a sign.
JR sign, okay. So now you're gonna spend that money twice?
But we didn't vote on that.
Where's that big gavel? Big,
Can't spend it but once, Mr. Chairman.
well, we're not there yet, so don't, I know where it's gonna be spent, so,
Okay.
okay, I'm just saying.
This kid now,
No, I
big
know,
easy.
I know.
Easy
I
kid.
just think that, I'd just like to hear what this is gonna do, that's all. These were my questions, most of them were, I think, and, do we have any okay, we got plenty of, Mr. Rawls, you're first. Everybody's lit up.
I think them numbers.
Colonel
was
Wilson,
right.
They are wrong, that's something,
I think mine was first.
Go, I'd like
you
to ask
always
this question.
think yours were first.
So one question I have is, I'm confused the way I read this. There's basically right now about a $450,000 shortfall when you include the $90,000 for
Mr.
the
Rawls,
insurance.
can you hold that thought for just a
Yep.
sec? I'm being asked if we could take a 3-minute break.
Yeah.
Okay, 3-minute break. Mr. Rawls, you have the floor, is how we left it. Thank you for allowing that break real quick.
I had some questions for Colonel Wells. So right now, you guys are at about a $450,000 negative, based on what we're looking at, including the insurance burden.
Negative to what?
Huh?
Negative to what?
Well, we're shorting them. I took the 369 and 90 and just called it 450. It's actually closer to 460, but it says that it includes, if I'm reading this right, the $500,000 give back. So what is the actual number, do you think, on the give back if it's not 500,000?
Okay, so first of all, it's my understanding after discussion with county staff that my proposed budget for the coming year is not reflective of a 500 grand return, correct? So that's not in the equation.
Okay.
So it's our understanding that our proposed budget, not including anything with insurance, is $368,479, some change less than our request. So that's where I think we are with that. And again, as far as the insurance goes, you know, I totally understand the position that the county's in, and I totally understand my friend and mentor's position he's in, Mr. Turner. It just to the way with us, it just is going to be one more tiny step where we're going to try to not turn over your experienced deputies to other counties. And if that's a $91,000 expense, it's not laying in a dress drawer somewhere. We'll cut it somewhere else. But it's just we've just got to quit turning over your experience of your deputy sheriffs to other counties. And we won't be able to sustain that for years to come. But we are going to try to sustain that this year the best we can. And who knows? And we'll have to, you know, cut it from somewhere else. It's not laying around. So if you put that into play, then now we're $459 and some change short of our request is where we are. And then to address Mr. Harvey just real quick, our total outstanding vehicle purchases for this year, which means that we have cut the POs for those vehicles, they are not in our possession yet, is $811,442. Now you can take about $8,000 of that out because that's the expenses like the light bars and the stuff. But actual just the total amount is $811,442 and 20 cents is the vehicles that we do not have in our possession yet for which we've cut POs. So it is likely that that amount will come back to the county because it won't be able to be spent by October the 1st, and then we'll have to just request that back to pay for these cars that are actually in the county but can't be turned over to us yet because they're not complete.
Can you state that in layman's terms?
The vehicles?
Your 800,000, you're looking at giving us back 800,000.
We have to give you back everything we don't spend by about the 15th of October. We don't plan to have possession of these cars by
Do
October.
you have that budgeted in this budget? Okay.
Well, it's
in this year's budget.
it's in the 21 budget. This money was spent out of the 21 budget. It was promised out of the 21 budget.
How do we carry it forward into 22?
What's that?
How do we carry it forward into 22?
The same way we do every year. The administration of the county works very closely with that. We present to them any expenses out of the previous budget that didn't complete,
Okay.
and so they'll return that so that we can basically complete out 21's budget.
But that's a net zero at the end of the day.
It's a net zero. It's just paying a 21 bill in 22.
Right.
Yes, sir.
You know, you and I have talked a lot in the past about, you know, the cost to hire and train and turnover. What is your average years of experience right now in the county off the top of your head?
I'll be honest with you, I'd have to work that again. We worked that figure earlier this year, and the average experience on the road for a road patrol deputy was just under 3 years. It's probably a little less than that now with some loss this year. Those losses have been replaced, so the deputy sheriffs are in position to fill those, and they're coming out of training at a pretty healthy rate. So we're getting back up to speed as far as that goes. But so I don't have the exact number to tell you where that is at this time, but I can get it for you.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I just, you know, this all comes back to we need more funding in the county to be able to better fund our constitutionals. And in some cases, better funding them comes back and saves us money in the end. You know, I don't think it's gonna it would hurt us at all if we had a 4, 5, or 6 year seat time. If the answer to that question was 5 years, the longer that we have people staying in these in these positions, the more valuable they are to us, and it actually saves us money to keep them there. If I call Jared up here, he would say the same thing with paramedics. It costs us a lot of money to train people and get in their positions and then to turn them over so another community can benefit from it. It just seems like we really, really, really need to be looking to budget to be able to satisfy their requests, not just on a whim. Take a look at what their breakdown is, but actually fully fund them. And the way to do that is having other revenue sources. The promise that housing costs go up and up and up, yeah, I don't see it going down in the next couple of years. I do think that there will be a point in time when things stall in the near future. I don't know how it's going to affect Putnam County this time around versus last time. There's a lot of things that are different this time. If St. Johns County and Flagler County was to slow down a little bit, I don't know that we're in that bad a shape like last time. But not looking at just housing to fund the county, I think, is something that we should be doing. And we're not looking at ad valorem assessment, is my point. So, and it would not be unique if we took a look at other communities and other counties and took a look at their tax bills. We would see fees and MSBU's and all these other alternative funding sources that we don't have on ours.
Thank you, Mr. Rawls. Mr. Turner, you're next. Your light's not on, sir.
Okay, I understand the concept that's been happening since I got here. We find out how much money we got, and it seems like some people in the government find out before other people in the government, and a plan is made on how we gonna get all the money. So we came up with a plan the other day, and I realize it wasn't unanimous, but we came up with a plan the other day that basically said you get your percentage. There it is. Live within your means. You got a special project, you need help with something special, then come see the board. But it continued on, it's already continued on, and how can we get the rest of that money? So we got $464,000 left. Projected left. We got $506,000 in requests. Even if we give it all away, we're still 42,000 short, and the BOCC side has gotten squat, just like the last 3 years. Now, guys, I'm in a position that I hate being in, because there's no way to do this and not seem like I'm not 100% law enforcement and emergency services, because that's not true. I wish we could fund you double what we fund you, but somebody has got to be. It's not a matter, well, let's go ahead and give them the money and pay it all. We'll figure out somewhere to get it. That ain't how it works. That's not how it works. So, and it's not like we haven't taken care of the sheriff's department. In the last, from 17 until 1921, the budget has gone up $3.989 million, and that's taken out all the extras, all the givebacks, all everything. That's straight requested appropriation. Went from $18,567,490 to $22,466,410, which is this year's appropriation. And they've requested another $1.1 million, which will make it $5 million in a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 year period. It's not like we're not trying here, guys, and we realize that everything costs more now than it cost 5 years ago. We realize that there was an 8 year period or 9 or 10 year period before that you just had to toe the line no matter what, because there wasn't any money available. So we're trying to catch up with some of that. And that's why I've been trying to be on board with the heavy-duty increase every year that we've been able to fortunately give to the sheriff's department. But this year, I think that the $368,000 that they're asking for additional, that we shouldn't fund them. I'm just gonna say it. And hopefully we could get somewhere in between. I realize they can use the money, but I got people that I know that could use the money to buy groceries too. So I'm just telling you, it's a tough world. It's not like we're asking you to live unrealistically within your means, and I'm not trying to point this straight at you, Joe. It's you, the clerk. Let me look at Matt a little while too, where you don't feel like I'm picking on you. I'll look down there at Matt, but and Charles, we've worked up most of Charles's stuff. I mean, we were able to get him the software he needed, and we were as an additional expense, a special project deal. And Tim got his. Well, you got your full budget by turning it in the state. We don't even get to talk about your budget. It's just you get what you request, and they give you the okay to have. So yours is a little different. So anyhow, I don't mind even giving them a portion of the additional money, but I think the BOCC should take a small portion of that I've lost my numbers, $464,000 that we have projected, and they ought to use it for things that the BOCC needs to use them for that are gonna be recurring expenses, that they have not had a damn penny in the last 3 years. Not a penny. The Board of County Commissioners hasn't had a penny on their side in reoccurring given to them in the last 3 years. It's all gone to the constitutionals, every bit of it. Tell me I'm wrong if I'm wrong. So some of that money needs to be fair. Again, fair. It needs to be fair, and part of it needs to go back to recurring expenses at the BOCC, and I don't mind if you give the rest of it, split it up amongst them, but they're asking for 42, and you want to split it up the same way that we're going to do every year on the percentage of the thing. I have no problem with that. That's fair. Everybody gets a cut out of the additional money, but just giving all the rest of it to the sheriff, it ain't fair. It ain't fair. Or giving the rest to the clerk or the rest to whoever. It's not fair. BOCC employees and BOCC expenses go up also. They go up as well. So I have no problem with doing that. If you want to give them more money, fine. Let's split it up at the same percentages we did the other 80% and split it up amongst them. I'm good. If that's what we want to do this year with our other 20%, I'm good. But we can't just give it all to one entity. It's not fair. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Turner, for the comments. Mr. Adamsack?
Yeah, so I can't combine the 91,000 with 368, I just can't get there. But as far as the 368 goes, I mean, I think a lot of when you presented the budget to us, when we had the budget meeting a while ago, was the result of things that this commission asked from the dais throughout the year. We asked for more traffic enforcement. We asked for more lifestyle type responses to calls. We asked a lot of the sheriff's office beyond what they were able to supply with the prior year's budget. So I think they accommodated that, and I actually, at the time that Gator had presented that, I actually said, I don't think you asked for enough, giving what this board asked of them to do for our citizens. I'm all for getting him getting the sheriff's office the $368,479 under the premise that we are trying to, get the animal officer back online. I know there's some steps to that we're going to increase the number of people doing radar out on key zones, Highway 100, other areas where we're having deaths to our citizens, where we're having accidents, where people are coming to visit our county and they're not leaving because they're smashing up their cars. We have an unprecedented rate of these things happening here. And it affects us not only for the sheriff's department, it affects our overall rating from a health perspective. It affects our overall rating as a safety perspective in the county. It just affects us so well that I think it's $368,479 well spent if our objective is to meet some of those things we asked of you.
Well, let me just say this. We took some recommendations and requests from the commissioners, and we didn't include that in a year. We kind of set a 5-year plan out to stand up a traffic unit to increase some problem-oriented policing deputies to deal with neighborhood-type concerns. And so a part of our increase this year was to get about a fifth of that done, which we think we're going to need over the few years. But I also do want to say, especially to Mr. Turner, who I consider a friend and is a huge supporter of law enforcement, that is not a doubt. And you don't have to worry, Mr. Turner, about blaming the sheriff's office for this increase in money, because we're expensive to operate, I understand. And I don't take offense to your questions. I expect robust conversations when we get into this. So I understand the position that we're in. I also probably most understand JR's position as well. I can't even imagine the situation that his paramedics and his crews are going through in this COVID. So, I mean, again, we're not trying to be selfish. And whatever you decide is right, we know that you're making your best decision, and we will make this year work on that with the amount, and we will continue forward on our 5-year plan to increase the deputy sheriffs on the street, to reduce those response times, to be more responsive to these non-criminal quality of life issues that you talk about. So that's basically where we rest, and we trust you to do the right thing, and what you do for us, we will make it work. And we will do everything we can to not only continue, but to increase our quality of service with whatever your appropriation is. Again, I appreciate the county staff and the work they've done with us on it this year. This has been many, many conversations and many scenarios run back and forth with Mrs. Young and Mr. Suggs. So we appreciate all you do. All that you have done for the Sheriff's Office over the last 5 years is not lost on us. We are in a tenfold better position than we were when Sheriff DeLoach took this office, and we owe you a great deal of appreciation for that. So do the best you can. We trust you to make those decisions, and whatever you do, we will make it through the year as successful as we can.
I'd just like to ask one more, or make a statement or a question, I guess, too, is, you know, the one thing since I've been in this county and I've observed the Sheriff's Department, and, you know, the one thing that is exciting about it is you guys do promote from within. So that is part of your turnover, is the promotion of people into new positions.
Sure, retirements and things do take part
right,
in that.
and that is exciting, because you're one of the few agencies that is able to do that on some level effectively, I guess, and that's the wrong word. That seems to be able to do it in a way that seems like people have a defined career path and a path forward, and I think that's getting better in all other areas as well. So some of that turnover is in promotion when you're talking about the guys that are in the streetcars.
Sure, the result, absolutely. So all of the turnover is not lost to other counties. Right. There's no doubt. We have retirements. We have several more that are ending their drop plans on their retirement in the next couple years. So absolutely, we do have folks that stay for us for an entire career. And we do, through robust career development programs, try to promote from within. For the first time ever, we did do some outside searching for our new Director of Corrections, who is now Major Surrency. Just turns out that when we considered some outside folks, we had the best possible scenario already in-house with us, and so that's going well. But I appreciate the compliment on that. But yeah, absolutely, we have turnover for people that don't go to other counties. They just decide, you know what, I don't like this career. I don't want to do it anymore. And we're seeing more and more of that. It's almost becoming synonymous with the military service, where young men will come right out of high school or college and do 5 or 6 years of their service in their community instead of to their country, and then they go on into the private sector. So it's not all them leaving for other agencies. This past year, it was about 14 that did for other agencies, but that's not all of it. You're absolutely correct.
For I guess I don't know how you got to your number, Commissioner Turner, what did you come up with?
464.
460.
Yeah,
That's on your packet.
But I think he was saying that that's what's left in our.
That's the 20%.
20% of the deal.
Oh, yeah.
$4,000.
Okay.
Okay.
I thought you were talking about like reserves and other things, right?
No.
So what is our goal as a commission? Is our goal to have 16.6% reserves, or is our goal to have 28% reserves? Is our goal to have 22% reserves? At what point do we make that line? And I would assume, and I wasn't here, when it was 10% is the mandate, and I would assume the 6-point-something% extra was for these type
I
situations.
think she's gonna bring that to us next Tuesday. That was what we asked
Yeah, but that
her
plays
to do.
into, I mean, are we making a decision on this?
On the reserves or not, no.
No, it plays into it, because
Okay.
if we're just gonna do 16.6%, and that's 6% is living within our means, the rest of it could be used for other things, whether it's, again, funding this $400-some thousand shortfall for all the
Or the $7 million in capital request.
Right,
Plenty
right.
of places to spend it.
I understand, and I get what you're saying by recurring, but we're not required to have those reserves, so why can't we can do whatever we want with them. So we're not required to have anything more than what we said we want to have is 16.6%. So this idea of recurring doesn't matter for anything over that 16.6% that we said that we were going to use. So there is a big chunk of money out there beyond that 9-point-something million. There's another $8 million out there. Now, yes, we have a list of things that, and some of it may go to the CARES Act, some of it may be able to do ARPA, things like that. I think it's behoove of us to ensure $500,000 that goes to the CARES Act and ARPA, and that this $400-some thousand goes to the constitutionals. That's just my opinion.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Is that Mr. Ross?
I'm sorry.
I got a different twist on the ARPA. Joe, if you can come back up real quick. The recovery pod, how much do you think that costs over the next year to fund?
The cost for the drug recovery pod? I'll be honest with you, I don't think that will cost the taxpayers anything. The reason is because any services that we provide above and beyond what is statutorily required for our inmates is acceptable spending for inmate welfare money. That's money for which the sheriff's office, we earn that money through their canteen use and the extra things that they purchase, their texts that we don't, when they send emails out of the jail, that costs them money. Their telephone calls cost them money. Their video visitations cost money. The taxpayers don't pay for any of that. So that's a great use of inmate welfare money because we are providing a service to the benefit of our inmates that is above what is required by Florida Model Jail Standards. So I don't foresee that being much of any significant cost to the taxpayers.
How about the medication assisted treatment while they're in jail?
Now, their pharmaceuticals and healthcare does cost us money.
Isn't that part of the?
What's that?
Isn't that part of the recovery pod?
If it's prescribed by the doctor to help them deal with withdrawal symptoms and things along those lines, I don't think we can claim that as inmate welfare. I think anything a doctor prescribes is considered the minimum standard because I don't have any option but to give them what a doctor prescribes.
Do you have a number in your mind that costs per year?
Just the pharmaceuticals specifically dealing with the addiction? No, sir, I don't have that particular number for that. We do that only in limited cases. When the doctor prescribes it, it's generally dealing with withdrawal, especially when we take in pregnant inmates that are addicted. So it's to help with juice or withdrawal, protect the fetus and things along those. But that's not widely prescribed in the jail.
I was hoping you would say, give me a big number. I could say, well, there's
So,
a good use for ARPA
we
money.
have not had any conversations with county administration or anybody reference, am I saying ARPA, is that correct?
Yeah.
ARPA funds, and what do we do that may qualify for those? I'll welcome that conversation if the county administration believes that's a way that we should be taking advantage of some available funds. I'll be willing to sit down and have that. I'm sure there's something we do that may qualify there. But unlike CARES, which we were very involved with and were very successful in taking care of some expenses with CARES, that conversation just hasn't started yet. That may be a golden opportunity for us in the future, and I'm ready whenever they are.
So you'll be here next week?
I'm here, yes, sir. So whatever you need me, just let me know. But again, I don't know the requirements there. I'll start educating myself on that, and then we can certainly engage in that conversation. And if there are expenses in this current budget that would be qualified for ARPA that could offset, this conversation may not even be necessary any longer if that's the possibility. I don't know.
Have you seen the slideshow presentation that was given?
I have not seen. I've not done anything with ARPA. I wasn't sure what the county's, county administration and the board's appetite was going to be. If you had already had some ideas in mind for where that was going. Today is the first opportunity I've heard that it may be an opportunity for the sheriff's office, so I need to catch up on lost time there because I have not done any of that yet.
Sam Solomon can send you that. If you,
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
yeah,
Okay.
he put together a real quick read slideshow presentation.
Yeah, I'll be happy to start educating myself on it. Maybe an opportunity for us to where we don't need to.
That might
worry
change some
about
of this
it.
conversation next week.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir.
Okay, Mr.
Yeah,
Pickens?
Colonel Wells, I guess your initial projection for a return back to the county was $500,000.
And in about June, it was $500,000 unaccounted for dollars, assuming that, because that's usually about where our reserve, we try to keep it for hurricanes and stuff. So, however, like I mentioned, I don't know exactly where the unaccounted for is going to be. So I can tell you that our expenses have been rising steadily every month due to mostly inmate population because of the Department of Corrections not taking sentenced inmates, and because of the slowdown in the court system due to COVID, a lot of it's there. Now, I can tell you that every time that goes up, our CFO projects that it will continue at that rate. So, and I have not seen, I get quarterly reports on our budget like you were talking about through the year, except for the last several months, then I get a monthly. So I don't know that it's likely, but have our costs started to slide down? It could go higher. It's just very fluctuating right now. But we were projecting at the level of expenses in about June to return about $500,000 unaccounted for dollars. But that has monthly just significantly decreased just from the cost of pharmaceuticals, the amount of inmates that are in the jail, motor fuels. And the other, I won't take a lot of your time, but the other one that's been very interesting to me is the amount of money spent on vehicle maintenance because of all of these new cars that you helped us with last year. are not on the road. We're putting water pumps and transmissions in cars with 220, 230,000 miles just to have something to drive, because we have brand-new cars that have not been made available to us that y'all helped us with last year, that we're talking about the next year, and I still don't have deputies in those cars, just because of the supply chain.
Okay, thank you, Joe.
Mr. Turner?
Yeah, Joe, don't sit down yet.
Thank goodness, I almost thought I wasn't gonna get any questions.
Did it have an impact on your budget whatsoever to take over law enforcement in Crescent City, Florida?
No negative impact at all.
So you're using that as a straight swap off? They're paying you enough to cover your expenses for that?
I can assure you of that the city did. There was negotiations on what level of service, but when they finally decided in on their level of service and the number of deputies they wanted, that is a total reimbursement.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had a question I had for you. The other thing I'd like to say is, when you say that the BOC side needs a cut too, it's not just BOCC being greedy. The people that work, that drive our ambulances and that are our paramedics and that are our firefighters are just as important as the deputies. I'm sorry, they are. If you don't think so, go have a heart attack. You gonna call a deputy or you gonna call a paramedic? I'm telling you right now, they're just as important. So, you know, if y'all want to give up the rest of the 464, I'm game. We can give it all away. The rest of the recurring money, I'm willing to vote on it today. I'm good with that. But let's do it at the same way that we did the other, on a fair percentage, which is what we did. We got that accomplished. So everybody gets a cut of the pie. There's the rest of the money. Quit arguing. Wait till next year before you come up with a reason to take some more money. Live within your means. Everybody knows what it is. We got it all spent. So there's no more left. We got it all spent. So that's what I propose, Mr. Chairman. If they want to do something today and split, if y'all want to do this up, then let's do it. Let's do it in a fair way as before. But let's not leave out our paramedics, because JR is not in a position to come up here like the sheriff's department is and lobby for his position, because he works at the discretion of Mr. Suggs, basically. And Mr. Suggs is going to shoot him if he comes up there and starts beating on the counter. So, you know, he's not in the same position here, not in the same position. So he has to rely on us being fair. And for us to give all the money to the sheriff, or all the money to the clerk, or all the money to the supervisor election is not being fair to them. It's just not being fair to them. So if you want to give it out in the same magnitude that we did the other 80%, I'll vote for that if that's what y'all want to do, to that level that we have left. And then we've still got the other stuff we've got to deal with, you know, the reserve monies and what have you. But at least that's funded. So it'll be another year of it all being funded. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Amzat?
Yeah, so you brought up something that new. I'd love it if the executives could propose things a little bit more than they did in this cycle, and hopefully that happens next year. I'll just leave it at that. As far as JR goes, I think we're working on some alternative funding sources where I don't know where we're at as far as getting responses back to the 60,000 we authorized to get an assessment or whatever we're talking about. But I think that's a little bit separate, and that's forward thinking, and we're trying to take care of that. I don't think we have that option with the sheriffs or the constitutionals to do that type of MSBU for the clerk of courts or supervisor elections, or to do whatever the other tax, which we really need to make sure we're acting on that to get it in place at least, even if it's $1 per building. Because that one, if we do go over 75,000, I think we lose the ability to do that. But separate from that, I'm for funding all of this, and I think that we can use any reserves above 16.6% to make up any shortfall there, and I think we should move forward with that.
Thank you, Mr. Amzat. Mr. Pickens?
I think the fairest way is to it's to continue what we started with this budget process. It's hard. I want to fund everybody. There's no question about that. I think we've done as good as we can. But I think the percentage that we set forth at the start of the budget process is that, I think that's what we ought to use as percentages and divvy up the rest of this money is the way I feel we ought to do it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Turner.
Oh, yes, you know, I understand it's real easy to say that we're looking at MSBU for countywide fire services, and we're looking at higher fees and higher taxes and higher whatever. I understand we're looking at all that, but it hadn't been passed yet. And currently I haven't seen a program that I'm gonna support, because I'm not for raising taxes. I'm not for raising fees. I'm not for doing all this if we've got the money to live within our means, and we do. I'm just telling you, I feel like we do. And so anyhow, I'd truly like to see at this point, if we're gonna do anything, let's live within our means and divvy this money up the same. There's nothing that says that if y'all could get your, if y'all can get your higher fees passed or whatever it is, then, and we get extra money, then we can always take the money that it would replace that we're gonna give fire services and use it for something else to somebody else. But saying, well, we might be gonna do this, so let's give all the money away to them, that's just not fair. It's just not fair. All I'm asking is that if we're gonna do this today, let's do it in a fair way. That's what we've done so far. We've done it as fair as we could. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
I want to say that, that the sheriff's office, at least in my opinion is, and I speak for the sheriff who's out of town today and all of our employees, that we agree that is probably the fair way to do this. And so if it helps in the decision at all, the sheriff's office would be totally satisfied with that, and let's equitably share what's remaining and do the best we can by all of our other county employees. And we will, as Mr. Turner says, we will live within our means this year and do the absolute best we can. But that is probably the only fair way that I see. So we could get behind that 100% right now today.
Thank you. Mr. Rawls?
You know, every year we talk about living with our means and all this, but, and I understand the concern that Commissioner Turner has about MSBU's and service fees and all that, but the fact remains is, you know, this year we reduced services. Our budget guarantees the public that they'll have less this year than they had last year, and last year they had less than the year before. We've guaranteed that. You take a look at the, you know, what we put in for roads and, or for bridges, for drainage and guardrails. It's half what we did last year. So we can tell the public that we passed a balanced budget. We can tell the public that we're living within our means. But what we don't go out there and do is pat ourselves on the back and tell the public, by the way, we're reducing your services because we don't have enough money to cover what we did the year before. As we go forward, and I'm going to keep bringing this up until I feel like everybody fully understands, we're facing a $15 an hour minimum wage issue. So next year, we'll be at $11 an hour minimum. And we're starting to compress our payroll even more. And the year after, we'll compress even more. If we don't have some sort of plan in place, whether it's an MSBU, a special assessment, whatever you want to call it, then what are we going to tell the public? You know? We're not fixing dirt roads that need to be fixed. We're not providing services that we're supposed to provide. You know, we can blame it on the rain, we can blame it on the equipment, but at the end of the day, it's because we're severely underfunded. And, you know, the conversation right now is we're just going to take the few crumbs that are left, divide them up equally, and let's just do the best we can do. You know, it doesn't sit well with me. We do have a fiduciary responsibility to our taxpayers, but we also have responsibility to our employees. And, you know, we need to be meaningful in what we do. And I just have this horrific vision that by the time we get to the $15 minimum wage, if we brought everybody up 3%, those that were at $15 an hour at $17.25 an hour, and how do we look them in the eyes and tell them that we're sorry that they're part of the new impoverished population in Putnam County, the state of Florida, because the cost of business will not go down as these costs go up. They will go up. And as they go up, our employees will suffer even more. So, you know, like it or not, I think we do have to come up with some sort of funding sources, whatever they be. I personally think that the proper approach is to do the right thing, the non-socialistic thing, which is make everyone accountable. If you have a front door, you need the services, you pay for them equally. It doesn't matter what your property is worth. At the end of the day, when you need an ambulance, you need an ambulance. My family experienced a situation the day where my mother-in-law went out walking at 2 o'clock in the morning with her dementia, got lost and turned around, and we could not find her. And it was the scariest 30 minutes of my life. And it took a sheriff's deputy to walk up to my pickup truck where I failed to look, and she was sitting there, but she got caught in the rain. But when I needed a sheriff's deputy, I needed him at that time. So, you know, we can sit here and bloviate all we want about we got to live within our means. But living within our means means we need to tell the public the truth, which means they will have less services. They can expect their roads to not get better necessarily, and in some cases maybe get worse. I'm willing to carry that conversation if that's the direction this board wants to go in. But I, for one, would rather look at alternative funding sources.
Thank you. I believe
Lee Pickens was next, Chip.
Mr. Pickens and then Mr. Adamsack.
Yeah,
The numbers came up.
yeah, I don't disagree about alternative funding at all. It's going to come to that of some sort, and we're working on that. Is that correct, JR? You're working on that, so we appropriated $60,000. So you can't do it all. I don't think you can do it all at once, right? Yeah, so I don't think you can do it all at once. So that is in the future. I think we're going to have to do that because we are underfunded, and probably the ad valorem tax. You know, if we have another correction like we did 15 years ago, then where are we? So and by all means, I don't think there's any commissioner up here or any staff doesn't support the constitutionals 100%. And I'd love to be able to fund it all. I just don't know that we can do that. And I truly believe that if you come back at the end of the year and you have a shortfall, you come to the commission, and we'll do the best we can to accommodate. But I think the fairest way is to do it by the percentage that we set forth earlier.
All right, Mr. Adamsack and then Mr. Turner.
I guess I just want to, there is going to be more alternative funding mechanisms coming towards us from the federal government and other agencies. We already know of some that are in proposal. We have ARPA. Some of that is going to offset this. We're aware of that. It's going to continue for the next at least 12 months. I think we need to take some look at the landscape and understand that some of these things that we have here, like in green, are going to be offset. And I don't know, I just can't get to not funding another 100,000 when we have, you know, when we looked at the presentation for the 7th, there's $7-point-something million from ARPA. We have reserves that are above the 16.6%. If we want to vote to say it should be more than 16.6%, we should do that. If we're not going to do that, then the BOCC needs to live within their means of the set reserve that we've stated, which is 6% or 9%. And that's who needs to live in there. Our means is us. And if we need to extend that means, then we should do so. And that should be through analysis. So I just can't see, we're arguing over $100-some thousand in the grand scheme of things. And we know there's $7-point-something million coming from ARPA. We know there's going to be another infrastructure bill coming. I'm personally 90% confident that it's going to occur. I just don't see the reason to continue this argument because it seems more cut and dry to me than it is, I guess, to the rest of us.
Thank you. Mr. Turner?
I'll try to stay on subject, seeing how we have it in the last 30 minutes.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we take the $464,000 that's left in the regular projection, and we split it up by the same percentage that we voted earlier to split up to the constitutionals and the BOCC.
I'm willing to second it for conversation.
Proper motion by Commissioner Turner, proper second by Commissioner Adams. Let me start the conversation. I understand, but I was more or less going with the overage of the 359. Some of these, I think supervisor of election only needs about probably now maybe 18, 20,000 with a $15,000 attorney fee for an election.
But he gets his
I thought we were paying the attorney fee.
He gets his percentage.
Okay.
That's the motion.
I hear it. Okay.
So you don't like the percentage deal now?
No, I didn't say that.
Okay.
I'm just saying that you could be overfunding. We don't know what those numbers are, but that's
He
fine.
gets like 3%, so it'd be 369, about 15, which is what he's asking for.
Didn't we
Didn't
take
he
on
get
the
our 2%?
attorney though? I
2.3
thought we
no.
took on the attorney.
No, we didn't. Charles, you want to talk real quick?
You know what the percentage is, Ms. Young, of what we voted before?
51 for SO. What was your percentage?
2.35.
2.35 for the supervisor of election.
Tim, what was yours?
Here, I got them. Here, I'll read them. Real quick. Putnam County Sheriff's Department was 54.38 of ad valorem now. Property appraiser 4.6, clerk 4.19, supervised election 2.35, and BOCC 34.48. Is that right? That's, do you want to look? You want to look at it just to me? I didn't.
It sounds about right. Is that 4.19?
Sorry.
You have 4.19 or 2.19? 2.35.
What was this, the supervisor of election?
You had 4.19?
Okay, she's answering you right now.
The numbers he read out were gross numbers before the implementation of the 20% coming off the top. So when the 20% came off, the Putnam County Sheriff's Office was left for 43.5% of new net ad valorem revenues. Property appraiser 3.68, the clerk 3.36, the supervisor of elections 1.88, the BOC 27.58. The other 20% went to the BOCC.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, what I was gonna say, I'll do this really quick.
You might want to put that microphone right up to you.
Since you and I talked yesterday, and because of the administration helping on taking over that one big item that was redistricting that's only once every 10 years, that puts me down within about 15,000 of being able to completely, meet the obligations. And as I mentioned it to you yesterday, I still have a little problem with the supervisor of elections office having to pay for a county attorney since it's the Putnam County Canvassing Board. It's not that. So my request would be, and they have done it all these years, my request would be if they would be willing to do that one aspect, and who knows, they might even could get it even lower cost. I can live with what you've already given us and not ask for anything else. And I would still be able to eat the insurance cost rise, and I did not include a raise at the time, but I could do that and keep it in line with what you all are doing with others.
But you wouldn't have to eat it. So you're.
I didn't include it in my original
Turn
proposal.
it into your
But it's not enough anyway. Even if
1.2% to your employees.
I'm sorry.
You can pass the 1.2%, which is the only cost to the constitutionals, on to your employees.
Yeah, and I just think that sets a bad precedent. I disagree.
That we gave
I agree
them.
with the other constitutionals, and that is, if we have to eat it, we'll eat it.
We
but-
paid 90% of 2 years, and that's a
Yeah.
bad precedence?
Well, but weren't you the one that said that we went all those years without raises? I mean, think about it, it's the attitude, it's the,
And we've been giving them too, last year,
Well,
this
the
year.
last two,
we've
yeah,
been
but that
giving
doesn't-
raises and doing the best we can to keep up. I mean, I understand, Charles, I get it, buddy, but
Yeah.
we got,
all I'm asking is that one aspect of it. If you all would consider that part, you won't have to ask, I mean, I won't be here asking for anything else.
Why were we trying to put the lawyer over? Why did we want to change that? I don't understand that.
the lawyer still needs to work for him, even if we give him the additional money to do it, because
Right.
the lawyer
But in-
works. It's a supervisor of election, the lawyer, we have historically paid for it. In my book, I think that's a conflict of interest, because he works for and represents the supervisor of election. The
Terry-
county has historically paid for that, and I have no issue with
Terry,
paying
that's
for it
not,
now.
that's not accurate.
Okay,
In previous, it was Mr. Castleberry, and then it was
Stacy Manning.
Stacy and all. So it's been the county attorney. It's just when you all did the thing you did with Mr. Commando, it was easier with him being out of town to handle certain aspects, and they let us go ahead and get somebody that represents the county, but he doesn't represent me. I have a right in the state to go hire another attorney and let him represent my office. So that's That's
I
why I'm
stand
saying
corrected
it's,
and could care who pays for it.
right. And
So I
that's
think,
what-
I mean, given that information, I guess I'll rescind the second because this doesn't make sense, because why would we overfund one and not, so that we need to do something different than just balance it across. And this is partly why I didn't support the percentages to begin with, because we should handle each request as its own standalone thing, in my opinion.
We still can.
It's still,
That's where we've gotten.
but it doesn't change anything. They still get to, okay. So you withdrawed your second?
Yes, sir.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor without a second right now. Do we have a second?
Yeah, I'll second for further discussion. Charles? Yeah, I don't agree that we, but that's the way the percentages are. So you're saying that if we pay for the attorney,
I will be, with what you all have presented, and she found a little bit more money, or Larry, somebody
Right,
did.
right.
So mine was a little bit better than when you all first initiated that. Because they did take out the big part of it for the redistricting and the consultant and stuff that I think we're all working on now. If they would continue paying the attorney, then I would come in a little bit under and be able to still do what you all voted on, the insurance part of it, and giving my employees, so I would be, I can live with that.
without this
My turn to speak, so.
go ahead.
You know, Charles, the thing about it is you can always say, okay, you're gonna give me more money, so I'll take my percentage, and then, but I'm gonna have to come back to you and ask for a little help on the attorney that we've asked you to pay for. I mean, that's basically what you're saying, right? You go ahead and pay, I mean, it's the same thing. Take your percentage like we're talking about today, whatever that is, and if you have a shortfall because of your attorney, that's fine. But if you're using the insurance that we voted on today, the 1.2% that's carrying on to your employees that you've decided to eat and with, okay? And you're using that to offset, to want us to pay for your attorney, because you're taking that money to pay for the insurance that we've asked the constitutionals to pass on to the 1.2%, like we are, to all our employees. You really think that's fair, Charles? You really think that it's fair that now we've asked you to pass on the 1.2%? We've asked you, like we're doing to all our employees. And now you can say, yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and eat that, but I need you to pay for the lawyer. That's like, what's the difference?
Well, I guess, Terry, you and I might disagree. To me, the difference is, it's not a part of my budget to begin with to pay that attorney. I'm sorry, but that's just adding, it's like the federal government does, or the state, that you give me a mandate and then don't give me any money. And the governor in his office has done that to us this year, that we're gonna, have to deal with on all these changes.
How much money would he get? 464 times what percentage?
1.88.
How much is a lawyer, do you know?
15 grand.
12 to 15
But we
is what-
told you that if you had an anomaly, you could come back to us.
Yeah,
That's
but-
the bottom line. It's not, nothing's gonna change. So you have an anomaly, you come back, we need 15 grand or 13.5 to make this work. It's up to the board. That's what you said.
Well, again, to me, it's just an extra avenue that wasn't there beforehand. You all have for 50 years paid for the attorney, or however many years that we've had it. So that's the part I just, was trying to express, was if you leave that part of it out, you're not gonna have me up here asking for you for one thing.
It increases $8,700 roughly, so you're gonna still be short, is what I was saying earlier, because of that. But you'll be short $7,000 and you'll come to us for that at that point. Is that, because we said if there's an anomaly, let
Right.
us know.
Yeah.
And there's an anomaly here.
Okay.
That's short with the attorney?
Okay, I got numbers all,
Say,
I got all numbers.
I'm trying to wrap my head around this one.
I
Are
think
we
Matt was
pay-
first and I was
Are we
next.
paying for the attorney or not?
I
We're not, as of
Okay.
yet. He's
We're
paying
supposed to
for it
be.
out of his budget,
Budget.
out of his percentage, and if he can't make it or whatever, then, you know, the whole thing's getting lost. His cut of the insurance is $2,800. If this will make all this like go away, send me the damn bill for the $2,800.
You gotta treat all the kids
I
equally,
mean,
though.
I get it, but the thing is a very small portion of this is what we're talking here. I understand, and I understand I understand the mental part of it, like Colonel Wells said earlier. I understand that part of it, and you don't want any increase. I get all that, but we're doing an increase. If you decide not to do an increase, or any of the other, I'm trying not to make this about you, Charles, so I'm looking at the others too. I'm gonna look at Matt a while. If you decide not to do this or do the increase, then that's fine. If you can't do it and you run short, then come back, but I just don't know a fairer way to do this other than cutting it up. Just cutting it up, your
All right.
percentage.
Mr. Reynolds, you have the floor now. You had your hand up.
Yeah, I wanted to take a second to reiterate about the 1.2%. For example, in my office, you know, with the current funding, and even if the board decides to do it fairly and use a percentage across all the constitutionals, my employees still, I won't be able to give a raise, and they'll be facing an increase in insurance, and they don't, and my employees don't even get the benefit of rolling in their experience pay into their annual salary like board employees are. So it's really bad, and I've got employees kind of asking already, so does this mean we're not getting raises? Does it mean we're not getting raises? So I just wanted to reiterate it's a difficult position for me to be put in regarding my staff, because I don't have anywhere in my budget that I can just cut and absorb these costs. So that's just a statement I wanted to make.
Am I missing something? Isn't your cut 20 grand?
Percentage-wise, yes, sir, and then that would cover the,
Grand. And that's gonna keep you from doing all that for 20 grand? You're not gonna
no,
get
no,
raises?
no, I'm
You're not
short
gonna-
101,741.
Commissioner Turner's gonna cover that, so. That's what he said, I heard.
It's
Look,
on
We're getting
page-
kind of hangry here, guys, so,
Yeah.
look, we do need to wrap this conversation up, and we can finish this up and
We have a motion and a vote.
do,
If we're
we
not
do.
gonna vote it, we can start over.
we have a motion and a second, but we do still have some discussion. We lost complete control over this screen. So I'll just go to Mr. Adamsat. We're going to go final real quick. Mr. Adamsat?
Yeah, so I agree when you're talking about, Charles, is that a few $1,000s in the grand scheme of things is minor. But I'll also make the statement that $400,000 in the grand scheme of the overall budget is almost as minor. Again, we have $6.some million over the 16.67% that we've put that requirement upon ourselves in reserves, which can be used for anything we want to use it for. So the idea that we've said, that we've been told from this for months, that it can only be done for capital expenditures, which is what I was told every time I brought this up, which I kind of knew it wasn't true, and then I researched it, and now I know it's not true. So anything over the 16.67 that we've put the requirement on ourselves, we can use for anything we want. So to use part of that $6 million to cover this $400-some thousand shortfall seems like a no-brainer to me. And even to use part of it to cover some of our BOCC stuff seems like a no-brainer to me, because I see no reason for us to be carrying basically a savings account above the 16.67%. That would be us living within our means. So I would prefer to see some of it go back to the community and some of it, but I lost that argument. But I would have preferred to see some of it go back in a tax cut or a millage rate decrease, because it really isn't a tax cut, it's still a tax increase. I mean, my tax bill went up, everyone's did a little bit. But that's where we are.
Okay, vote on that. Drop the millage rate.
Too late now. Mr. Rawls?
Well, it's not too late. That was the maximum.
I'm sitting up here and I'm questioning my sanity, and I'm sitting listening to this dialogue back and forth between the constitutionals and what we're saying, and what we're saying is, you know you need more money, you know we got more money, you know you're going to give you more money in reserves. To Commissioner Adams' points, we need to spend some of the money on reserves It doesn't make us bad people if we balance our budget out of reserve, using reserve money, because we're in some pretty trying times. It's unfair to the constitutionals not to be able to cover the pay increases. We can reduce our services. We're going to do that. We're going to reduce our services and give our employees a 3% pay raise. I don't think that Mr. Reynolds can decrease services and really not upset the apple cart, because we're going to be upset because they control our paychecks every week. You know, if they said, hey, we're just going to cut paychecks when we get somebody available, or the information that you request from Commissioner Rawls will be to you in the next few weeks. We find somebody to operate this AS400 piece of garbage that you got us here, and you know what I'm saying? So it really is maddening to sit up here and listen to this thing going cyclical, because what we're doing is we're telling the public that we are, in fact, going to be decreasing services, or we're telling the employee we're going to decrease your pay. There is nobody that can wake up this morning and tell me that we have not experienced a massive amount of cost increases. Forget inflation. I filled my truck up the other day, $72 to fill it up. A year ago, it was $42. So the difference is the economy. But our employees are bearing the same thing. And, you know, when Mr. Reynolds sits there and talks about how he's got to face his staff and they're saying, well, we're going to need a pay raise. Drive down the road. Taco Bell is having interviews on Wednesday. They have that on their marquee this morning as I passed it this morning coming in. By the way, I apologize for being late. I was getting my teeth cleaned, and I could not get my cup of coffee after getting my teeth cleaned. But I think that you know, the fact that the constitutionals have to provide the services they have to provide, and we don't, puts them in a very unfair position. You know, obviously the sheriff's department can provide less services, but we're going to feel that instantly, and we're going to be catching the brunt of that when we catch the phone calls and emails from people saying, hey, these people are driving four-wheelers up and down the dirt roads doing donuts and blah 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 blah, and all we can say is, well, we don't have the money, we didn't fund them. So I don't like the percentage basis that we did, and now what we're doing is we're going away from the percentage basis. Well, you know, I agree. If Charles gives us back the attorney, it's our responsibility. We pay for that, then he doesn't need the extra money. We've stepped away from that theory now of we just give a flat percentage. But this is how we should be doing the budget. He comes up with a creative solution. We take it on. He says, I don't need more money. Matter of fact, I can give you back a little bit more, and then we can shift that money over to maybe Mr. Reynolds or to the sheriff's department, whatever. But
I'm not opposed to that.
If we may.
Okay, Mr. Turner, and then Mr. Adams.
Okay. Hopefully we can get out of here before the legislators show up.
We are the legislature.
Well, this is a different economy. But I'm telling you right now, 4 years ago was worse than now. I don't give a damn what anybody says. But they hadn't had a raise around here in 8 years. They hadn't had, I'm telling you, it was rank.
10 years.
3 years, 10 years, it's been rank around here. Last few years, we've been able to give some raises. We've been able to try to right some wrongs. The sheriff's department's needed some well-needed increases. The public works, the emergency services has needed some well-needed increases. We've been able to fix some things. Shoot, we were even able to give a little money back on a millage rate decrease last year from some additional funds that came in at the last minute. We've been able to do some good. The percentage deal is fair. It doesn't let us micromanage things all the time, but the percentage deal is fair. It's flat out. If you have an increase in ad valorem tax revenues, even though the millage rate hadn't increased, you cut it up fairly and equally. I don't understand why, other than one of you two didn't make the motion, I don't understand what the problem with that is. It's fair. It's fair. So anyhow, Mr. Chairman, we could sit and talk about this all day long. Would you please call for a vote on this issue?
Got one more comment, then I'll call for the vote.
Well, and there'll be another one, and another one, and another one.
One more comment. Okay, you're fine? Okay, please restate the motion.
The motion is to move forward with the $464,000 projected left at the percentages that we used before.
Okay,
Julie?
Mr. Pickens, second that motion, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign?
Aye.
The ayes have it, we'll move that forward, and we need to hurry up and get out of here. Public comment on miscellaneous items, is there any public comment on miscellaneous items? And this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you. See you back here at 2 for